All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Cleared Hot episode number 47. But before I get into who my guest is, let's take care of the admin side of the house first. This episode is brought to you by Onnit. They have a website dedicated to those of you who listen to the podcast. It is Onnit, ONNIT.com/hot, H-O-T. If you've listened to the podcast, you've probably heard me talk about them before. They are a health and fitness juggernaut in their world, or in their words. I think of them as a health and fitness brand that focuses on, what would be the best way to describe this? Last episode I talked about it in terms of macro and micro, but they do a little bit more than micro. I would say what they are going to do is they offer you solutions that's going to help your macro goals. They have a pretty wide variety of products. If you go to onnit.com/hot, I'm just going to kind of walk you down the page right now. The first thing you're going to see on that page is the Onnit 6 body weight. Now, it is my understanding that the 10% off from the podcast does not apply to that, but inside of that content in and of itself, what you're going to do is you are going to find a bunch of fitness-related stuff, diet tips, recipes, supplementation stuff from the one and only Kyle Kingsbury, also known as the Pinky Archer. There's a lot of cool stuff that is in there. Just below that is the Alpha Brain free trial, which, again, if you're a listener to the podcast, you've probably heard me talk about that. TPC, or the Total Primate Care. These are things I actually do not go on the road without. There's a morning and an evening. Again, though, these are the micro side of the house. In addition to having these things with me when sometimes my fuel or the source of my fuel is going to vary a little bit, this definitely helps out, but it's not my primary nutrition. This is supplemental to my nutrition, but it's got packet for the morning, packet for the evening. Alpha Brain's on there twice if you wanted to buy some instead of the free trial. And then the last thing on there is the MCT oil, which, use with caution. People probably get tired of me saying that, but if you use too much, you're going to remember that I did say it. And you'll probably remind people not to use too much. So, onnit.com/hot. They are a really cool sponsor. They're a supporter of the podcast. And if you happen to buy stuff from them, go through that route, or don't. Totally up to you. Now, moving on to my guest for today. This interview, conversation, discussion, I don't know the right word to describe it, has been a long time coming. I would say that it's been almost a year. And I met this individual at a very important time in my life. It was shortly after I was injured on the job. I didn't put in an OSHA complaint, but I was injured on the job nonetheless, and I was slowly navigating my way out of the hole that I put myself into. It's not my injury's fault, it was my fault. And the mechanism that really helped me turn the corner was exercise. And at this time, before meeting Mark, and actually I should say his name is Mark Twight, and if you know who this is or have heard of Mark, you're going to understand how difficult it is to actually describe who he is and what he has done, because there's so much. But I digress. For me, exercise was a huge vehicle in my recovery. And prior to getting injured, I was just on the hamster wheel of back and bis, chest and tries, and then going for a run. Not that there's anything wrong with that. For the job that I had, I would not describe it as the optimal methodology. So when I first met Mark, it was in the context of exercise, and he really opened my eyes to a different style of working out that I have integrated and used since that day that he came out to the East Coast and we first met. He is unique, to say the least. He is intense. He is committed to the things that he has done in his life, and his list of accomplishments are pretty damn long. He's a world-class alpinist, and I actually had him talk about the difference between being an alpinist and a climber, because I often get confused. Post or during that time period, or shortly thereafter, actually, I think, he became an author. He's written 2 books, working on a third. He's worked in Hollywood. He's worked on, I think, 8 or 9 movies, starting with training the stuntmen and actors for the movie 300, and then moving on into the superhero universe, Wonder Woman, Superman, people who wear capes, essentially. A cyclist, founded a gym during that same time period. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And we had not seen each other before sitting down to record this podcast for 13 years. Like I said, the conversation was a long time coming. We really kind of reconnected about a year ago, and started discussing it then. And we both agreed that I wasn't in the right spot to do it, given how few episodes I had done. And he had actually never been on somebody else's podcast. He now hosts, or is one of the hosts of the Dissect podcast, which you can find on iTunes. But as far as being a guest on somebody else's, I was incredibly fortunate enough to be able to be his first. We had a pretty long conversation, and it was one of many that I hope that we will have in the future, because honestly, we just scratched the surface of just about everything we could talk about. So I'm going to stop talking about it and let you guys listen to it. Cleared Hot, episode 47, with the one and only Mark Twight, coming at you.
Okay, got the red smoke. Gun run, north or south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
I will say this, I'm amazed that nobody has pinned you down for a podcast before, even though I know why, because I can imagine what your response was to each and every one of them.
Oh, fuck. The note I got from, my friend Brittany Griffith, who I like to call my climbing coach, but she's a dear friend. She's been on the Enormo cast with Chris Kalous a couple times. And she basically gave Chris my contact info, and he sort of wrote me out of the blue. And I wrote him back, like the total, it was in 2016 that it's still the original email in the chain, as is my response back to him. I said, dude, I fucking hate podcasts. I fucking hate journalists. And you get a free pass only because Brittany,
you have a known quantity vouching for you.
Exactly. The bona fides have been established. No, maybe, whatever. And so now now it's been full on 2 fucking years. We've been going back and forth.
Yep. And now you have your own podcast.
Yeah. And so he contacted me the other day, actually, and he said, hey, I'd still like to get together with you. And like, I might be ready.
Yeah.
Finally. I said, I have not agreed to be on anybody else's podcast yet. My first interaction, actually, it is going to happen.
Yep.
Yeah. Next week, because this was, I think this email exchange happened yesterday. So it was going to fucking happen tomorrow that I'm going to go on someone else's podcast.
And it's going to be amazing.
It already, if it really has been 13 years since we've actually seen each other in person, it's already amazing.
I am relatively certain that the last time we saw each other was the day that I left when you were doing the training on the set of the movie 300.
Yeah.
Because I came up for
like a 5-day seminar, essentially.
It essentially was. And so, when I met you today, or reconnected today, I pulled out, there's a binder sitting in front of us because this is audio only, obviously. But that binder is our initial meeting point. And that occurred probably a few months before I came up to, it was Vancouver, wasn't it?
Montreal.
I knew it was somewhere up in Canada.
Yeah.
And I think that was it, though. I mean, I remember coming up there, smashing myself for like 5 days.
Yep.
You introduced me to Tim Rigby, who I still stay in contact
with.
with.
Oh, cool.
Awesome
Good.
Dude.
Yes.
Yeah, we've jumped a bunch. I started flying after I met him. He was already flying. Crazy small world.
He was like one of the OG wingsuit flyers, if I'm not mistaken.
I would definitely say he is one of the OG wingsuit pilots for sure.
Okay.
There was a lot of people who went into the creation of wingsuit flying.
Sure.
All of which, a good point, are dead. Either I think in testing or in actual flying the suit itself. But he was like the phase right after that. Before it was
Okay.
like the avant-garde on YouTube of, everything, people flying a few feet off the ground. He was quietly doing that type of stuff on his own.
And they were, I think, at that time in 2005, he had, it might have been then or it might be a little bit later, he'd showed me some video of one of their early flights in Norway, which then that particular flight became a thing once people realized they could actually get out the bottom.
Somebody has to be the first one out the cannon.
Exactly.
Those people have balls that you need a wheelbarrow to walk around with.
Oh, good God. Yeah.
Yeah. I've met a few people that were active during that time period, and the perspective they have between that time period and kind of I don't know if I would say it's accelerated now. Maybe there's just fewer barriers to entry because of information. And if you have a credit card, it's a little bit weird that if you have a credit card, you can go buy everything you need to go do that with zero experience and then go do it. It's not going to work out well, but there's actually nothing stopping you from doing it.
There was I was working on an article yesterday that linked out to an old piece, and I can't remember what the website it's on, but it's basically the history of paragliding in the Pacific Northwest. And I was on the bleeding and broken edge of that, having been gifted, for better or for worse, a paraglider, and think it would, if I go back, it would have been sort of late. I'm thinking my first flight was November of '87. And
were you gifted training with that?
Oh, hell no. No, I got the package from John Bouchard, who so he was his his wife at the time ran Wild Things, and that was a company I was A, sponsored by, and B, worked for. And he had gone to, he'd spent a lot of time in France, had been over in Chamonix that year, and it was like the year that it was just kicking off, and guys were flying, doing some pretty interesting flights in the mountains. And so he bought a paraglider, and then he came back, and then he started making them because why not? And then he figured out, and I think he's just another guy who's, fucking overachiever, who figured out that if these things weren't square, they would fly better. And so he made the first elliptical
This
wings.
probably started with semi-elliptical, then fully elliptical. Same thing with canopies and skydiving. They're no longer square.
Okay. And so the early ones, the one that he gave me, I didn't have I didn't get my super lightweight one till later. The first one I got like the I don't know. I remember what color it was kind of, and it was kind of heavy and bulky, but he said, okay, when you go to Chamonix, you should link up with my brother-in-law, Manu, and he'll teach you what you need to know. So I did my first hops there, and then immediately got on a plane to Nepal. And then I did some flights where I learned that because in Chamonix you land and you're 1,000 meters basically. You're 3,200 feet, 3,500 feet, whatever. So when you're landing, the air is fairly thick, even if your takeoff is much higher.
Yep.
And when I got to Nepal, the very first flight that I did was above Namche Bazaar. I believe I was landing in the village of Kumjung, which is right around 11,000 feet.
You're going to have to run that landing out.
Why, yes. and no wind flag. There are prayer flags, but anyway, so I did a couple flights there, came back, and then and so this article about the sort of talks about my involvement in the history of Northwest paragliding and some incidents that I was involved in. At that time, where the paragliders, like you tell people that back in the day, the glide ratio was 3-1.
Yeah.
So you don't get a lot of, and that's with the small 7-cell rig.
That's a pretty good glide ratio in a wingsuit, actually, too. If people really flatten it out.
Okay.
But there's consequences to that because you're flying slower. So in wingsuit, energy is all based on speed. Similar to like when you're coming into land, if you bring more energy in a paraglider, you'll have a better flare, bottom end performance. So you can really flatten out for a 3-1, but if you're going to terrain fly, you want to be under a 1-1, building energy, just mashing that gas pedal so you can then flatten out and detach from terrain. That's how you escape from some of those areas.
So you're, gathering the energy
Yep.
into essentially a spring. And
Pretty
then-
much. The issue is, in a wingsuit, you get to use the spring once. And then it's like your health meter when you're playing Ultimate Fighter, if that's even a game. I can't...
Is it?
karate, whatever it is. But you have a health bar, or Call
Okay.
of Duty for people in the modern age.
Yeah.
As you get shot, the health bar erodes away.
Okay.
And in a wingsuit, if it erodes all the way to the bottom, you're going to stall. And until you tip your nose over and gather speed, then you
Again.
start building it back up. In the skydiving world, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Thousands of feet.
Sure.
If you put your feet up on the edge of a cliff and huck it off of that,
Yeah.
and you get to the stall point, you may not have the energy to refill that health bar, which is where people have what I like to call a high rate of speed collision with a non-moving object. Also known as game over.
Yeah. Yeah. Which happens at the end of video game. I mean, well,
But the energy concepts are the same. It's even
Okay.
the same in airplanes. Yeah, as the airplane flies slower, it gets mushier. The faster you go, the more control you have in the wings because of the air
Yeah.
going over and underneath the wing. I just that 3-to-1 ratio is. It's funny how there's intersections between totally different paths.
And I go think about that now, and real, there's modern. I was talking with Andy Doré, and he's taken up flying fairly recently, and he was talking about different, squirreliness ratings for the paragliders. like there's one that where if you just let go of everything, it flies
Yeah,
itself, and you don't have to do. And I guess that's would be the entry level one where, all goes bad. You just put your hands over your eyes, and
Yeah.
it fucking I don't think it would track away from a collision or anything, but
it
apparently
probably would fix the subpar human error that's being put into it.
yes,
Because most flying devices get out of control because the human being is freaking out.
which describes perfectly my experience with paragliding and why I decided at some point not to do it anymore
Yeah.
because I was too literal in my relationship with the world. I didn't like it when shit happened that I couldn't see. So
I could see that with you.
fly into a rotor and
Yeah.
the wing comes down around your ears. Like, why?
Yeah.
What did I do?
I'm doing everything correct, but I'm not getting the output that I was expecting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do.
Well,
because
fortunately,
it's
you're not known. Yeah, you're not known for being a paraglider, which is,
No shit.
yeah. Which though, I mean, I don't even know if I could describe the things that you've done in your life. So even though, and I love the fact we went immediately down a rabbit hole,
Yeah.
we have to give people some context about where you started and the things that you've done. Because I met you back in 2005, and the number of things that I've watched from the outside that you've continued to do since then are, honestly, it's probably more things than some people would accomplish in a lifetime. And that is just from the point that I met you and our lives collided. So we got to give a little bit of context. So I'm going to let you give the history of Mark Twight, because if I tried to, it would be very, very bad. And there'd be some missing decades.
Jeez, how
Start wherever you want to. Birth is a good spot. So there I was.
So there I was. And just a twinkle in someone's.
Well, where'd you grow up?
Well, let's see. So when people learn that I was born in Yosemite National Park, I was born in the clinic there. They think, oh, of course you're a climber.
I could see the connection.
So someone might,
Yeah.
It would be an easy leap to make. But so I was born there and lived in the park for 2 years, and then lived at Mount Rainier National Park for 3 years. The common thread there is that my dad was a park ranger.
Okay.
But he wasn't the sort of interpretive, nature walk guy. My dad was a federal cop.
He had a ticket book.
Yeah. And, and he got to like cruise it, it's hence my issues with authority.
We'll get to those.
Yeah,
That's later in the story arc of Mark.
Yeah, it didn't happen right away. It's true. But it also means, and so his relationship with the Yosemite Valley, with Mount Rainier, with the mountains was more of an observer. Like he was plugged in. He was in the military with Royal Robbins, first son of some of the big El Cap roots, and Wayne Mary was another guy who was active at that time, involved in the first Son of the Nose. So he knew those guys, but he was not into risk. So
he would watch with his feet firmly planted on the ground.
yeah, probably, with a warm cup of coffee, with his feet up on the dashboard of the Dodge Coronet 440 or whatever the, top car at the time was, like, watching dudes through binoculars and thinking, man, those guys stay 2 more nights in Camp 4. They're fucking mine. Which, there are some incidents involving my dad and climbers, and as my sister rightly pointed out, he was just doing his job, and that that is an explanation that has been used much overused. Anyway, so we when it was time, like I never went to school in the park. My sister was when we were at Mount Rainier, she was getting on a bus, I think, every day and going down to a town called Randall, where there was a school. So her first 2 years of school were there. When it was time for me to go to school, we moved to Seattle. So that was that. So I grew up. I don't like to say, well, people, if they ask me why I live in Utah now, I say because I grew up in Seattle.
I can also understand that. Yeah. And if you don't understand that, do a trip to Seattle.
Yeah.
And then do a trip to Salt Lake.
Exactly.
Make your choice.
And make a choice. Or you can just avoid the trip and just look at annual rainfall statistics and
yeah.
that for me was ultimately the deal breaker for Seattle for a variety of reasons. I mean, the mountains turned it out to be too small for me.
Did you start getting into the mountains while you were living in Seattle?
So we one of the best things about growing up is that every weekend we would go on an overnight camping trip or overnight or day ski trips in the wintertime. And that was an important thing for my dad's, but I didn't start actually going climbing. I was basically, followed my dad's observer status, go out, experience the mountains, but don't, keep the feet on the ground.
Look, but don't touch.
Kind of. And then, but being in the Northwest and being around climbing, I mean, it was something I was certainly aware of. There was a couple of books around the house, and one of those was like a Time Life book, I think it was just called Mountains. Part of a Time Life library of stuff. There was probably one on frogs or something like that. That one didn't interest me or maybe it was reptiles in general. That didn't interest me as much as the mountains book. And there was a lot of pictures of the French Alps in this book. So, and early pictures of early Himalayan climbing and that kind of thing. So that was my initial exposure, followed by the REI catalog. There'd be like pictures of Messner or Bonatti or somebody like that. They're hawking some European climbing shit. Those guys look so fucking badass. And
I can't argue that. They did. Damn.
I mean, if you could be like, you gotta be a fucking serious dude to pull off knee socks and fucking wool knickers.
You have to own it 100%.
Yeah.
Not only externally, but internally as well.
And just, and these days you would say, oh, that guy just doesn't give a fuck. And I'm like, no, that was the uniform. That was that was cool guy shit.
They actually thought they were cutting edge.
And they were.
Yeah.
They just, yeah. And so grew up in Seattle. First couple of years, I had some, I had some truancy issues with school.
Yep.
Especially after my dad left, which happened when I was 10 years old. And then I was basically left on my own to figure shit out. And so, as has happened in the past, people are like, you'll figure it out. And like, yes, I will. You may not like the result, but you're right. Yeah. I will. And so I think I had a half credit extra to graduate from high school, which is the extent of my formal education. I had to split algebra 1 into 1A and 1B.
Sounds like you were on my trajectory as well.
Okay.
Solid 2.6 GPA. Public school system, not a day past high school.
And there you have it. Yeah. I mean, it's and I would argue that one of the best gifts that I was given was the ability to learn. So if I wanted to know about something, I could learn about it and figure it out. And that got me down. The furthest down the road for climbing was reading and going to the artificial rock wall that they had built outside near the football stadium at the University of Washington, and then eventually, I was working in a restaurant. There was a climbing shop or outdoor store behind the restaurant. And so every time I was on break, I'd go over and hang out with those dudes. And eventually got a job working for, that was a company called Early Winters. And it was founded by a couple climbers, Bill Nicolai and Mark Fielding, I think were the initial, Mark Fielding, anyway, Nicolai for sure. He had an architect named Bill Edwards along with him. Ron Zimmerman was in charge of the marketing. They developed it, and Zimmerman was a marketing fucking genius. I started working in their factory where they made the tents, and then eventually moved back and had a retail job there. But got exposed to a lot of climbers. My very first climbing mentor was a guy named Dave Kahn, who was working in that retail store. Good climber, good kayaker, really good skier. That guy put me on the right path.
Yeah.
And I mean, in a good way, he was a super intelligent guy. And unfortunately, within basically a little over a year of our friendship, mentorship, relationship starting, he got killed in Chamonix when he was at a trade show in Munich. Went down to Chamonix. Basically got the postcard in the mail like the day before the boss at the work got the phone call.
Yeah.
Because that's how shit was back then.
There was no text.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, it's good because the distance between when something bad happens and us finding out about it was not immediate. It wasn't like...
It's a good thing.
Yes.
In the modern day, it's terrible. You're rushing to ensure that the family knows before people on social media start blasting it out, which I cannot even imagine receiving that notice via somebody. Can you imagine, like, just whatever, you're looking through a feed and like, my loved one is dead, like that?
Not cool.
It hasn't, that level of connectivity and that velocity of communication, I don't think has helped in that arena, at least.
I don't think so either. And there was a point where deep into my climbing career where I would dread the fucking phone ringing, especially, I mean, if it was after 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night or whatever, like the immediate inventory that was taken, like the phone's ringing and I'm just like, and no caller ID because...
Probably a rotary phone.
I think it had buttons. Anyway, but going through the immediate reaction is going through the inventory in my head. Who's where right now?
Yep.
Who is out there doing something, and then either choosing to answer or not choosing to answer, and then like getting this information. And I remember one of the very first times that and oftentimes it'd be like, oh, I read about it, and it was 2 months or 3 months ago that it happened, and that's great. There's nothing to be done.
Yeah,
it's over. It's the accident happened, the bad decision happened, whatever it was, and there is like time creates distance, and that reduces the weight in a way. And
all that's left is you have to process it yourself. You don't have to worry about any of the. If people have never been around when somebody dies, there's some mechanics that have to happen, and if you find out a few months later, all of that is alleviated, and then you can grieve.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And or pontificate, depending on how bad the decision was or whatever. But I just remember there was a couple of periods where like an announcement over the PA system at a fucking trade show that
That's called tact.
Yeah.
Good God.
Like just unbelievably callous, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that has developed in a way of, I think we just used to care more about life. And that's a rabbit. That's as close to that rabbit hole that I'm going. But I think it has a lot to do with
We'll
what
circle
we were
back to
talking
that.
about.
I bet. Yeah, because we'll eventually get to that topic. I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway, so
how did you continue your journey if a year into it your mentor passed?
Well, I wanted to go. The postcard is like, this is it's a picture of the Drew on the front, and that was what he actually was climbing it with a guy. They got to the summit by the normal route. We're coming down. The rappel rope got hung wrapped around some flake when they pulled it or whatever. And Dave was soloing back up to get it when he pulled off a loose block or whatever and went the distance. So the picture on the front was the Drew, and like it was one of the coolest peaks I'd ever seen. And so he wrote on the postcard, he says, "This is the alpine climbing cynosure of the world." And I'm like, fucking $50 word right there. I need to go. I try to use that word as for a number of years. I tried to use it as frequently as possible, just because nobody knew what it meant, and I was like fresh to that party. But so it's like basically the alpine climbing center of the fucking universe, and which Chamonix for me was, and that's where the best guys were at the time. And so I decided, okay, eventually I'm going to get there. I'm not on that road yet. I mean, he was such a much better climber than me. I needed to sort of cut my teeth in the Cascades and a trip to the Tetons, and
so now, this is probably a good point to describe the difference between being a climber and an alpinist, because I struggle. I mean, when I think of climbing, I think of the climbing that I was taught, leading traditional climbing, gym climbing, just to kind of work on the mechanics. Yeah. And I know that there are aspects of that when you are an alpinist, because you might be required to do it, but then there's also much more to being considered an alpinist. Yeah, that's my definition. Okay, feel free to correct.
I don't think there's any correction needed, because right now, under the heading of you're a climber,
yep.
the number of existing subdisciplines at this point is considerable.
Yeah,
and some of that has to do with with the advent of the indoor gyms and that sort of thing. But so the alpinist, I mean, the root word is alp. So this is basically, I was engaging in something, a practice which was undertaken and developed in the Alps. So essentially what that means is like you hike up to the mountains, you fucking put with whatever you might need, as little as possible, ideally.
Yep.
You climb the route under your own power. You get up, you get down, you go home. And what developed sort of out of that was taking this notion of applying the very minimal tactics of you only use what you can carry, and applying that to the greater ranges. So the tallest peak in the French Alps, Mont Blanc, a little over 15,885 feet, maybe, something like that,
plus or minus.
But plus or minus. The faces are all the biggest faces there, sort of in the 4,000 foot vertical foot range, generally 3,000 to 4,000 feet, et cetera. And so you max out on altitude, and the convenience factor of Chamonix is shocking. I mean, I can take a cable car.
Same for base jumping.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's a mecca from base jumping as well for that reason. There's jumps where you can cable car up.
Yeah.
5-minute hike downhill.
Yep.
Which is optimal in my mind.
Yeah.
Allow gravity to do the work twice to the exit point, and then once again after the exit point.
Yep.
But that's the reason why people flock there.
And that, whether it's climbing or base or extreme skiing or whatever, I mean, it's anarchy. You can do what you want.
It's much more accepted in that region of the world. When first time I went to Switzerland and walked into the Lauterbrunnen Valley, I describe it as being a diabetic in the candy aisle.
Oh, fuck.
I mean, you're looking at sheer walls and faces, and then there's the Eiger, the Jungfrau, the Monk. It's like, I can jump all these, and you go and you buy helicopter insurance for $10.
Yep.
You go buy a...
Did you go Air Zermatt or Air Glacier?
Air Glacier.
Good choice.
I didn't even know. That's just where the guy took me. Followed
nice.
The guy going to the...
go into the place and get the thing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But it's $15. You go to the local pub and you buy a sticker and you put it on your helmet, and they take that money and they aggregate it to the farmers in the valley. And so they will offset the cost of mowing out for you a landing zone and putting a windsock.
Yeah.
And then a trail or a trolley pass that was good for the cable cars, the trolleys, and the buses. And then it's foot powered all the way through the valley. I don't know anywhere in the U.S. where it's even like that. It actually, go back to Yosemite. Don't try that in Yosemite.
Yeah.
You're going to get your gear taken. You're going to get charges pressed against you. It's just such a more permissive environment.
You might drown.
You might drown. You might drown, depending on your choice of E&E routes.
Exactly.
For sure. The guy who taught me how to base jump, that was his mentor that drowned in the river. It's... Yeah. And it's, but it's about choices. And it's funny in that environment where there are legal consequences, people make choices that skews the safety ratio towards being unsafe.
I'm going to use my shitty rigging just in case it gets confiscated.
I'm going to jump really close to dark where I can't see as good, and therefore they can't see me as well. I'm going to jump at times where I don't think the Rangers are out. Well, why wouldn't the Rangers be out? Because the weather sucks.
Yeah.
So it's a risk, and it's increased, and you have that legal consequence in the back of your head. You go to Europe, and it's like, excuse me, ma'am, can I jump off that cliff? And their answer is, of course. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you die, they don't stop anything. It's not. I guess it's accepted. It's an accepted consequence of the individual participating in that behavior.
Yeah.
It's not expected, but if it does happen, they don't hold the other people accountable for, even if it was a really bad choice. If it was completely an error on the jumper, nothing really stops. It continues.
It continues. I mean, and so my guess is, that they have not removed the diving boards from any swimming pools in Europe.
I have not paid much attention to the diving boards.
I don't know. It's just part of one of my little pet theories about, like some kid breaks his neck and they fucking take diving boards out of all the pools.
So the last trip I did with Alex was to the Lauterbrunnen Valley. And in the 2-week time period that we were there, 12 people went in the valley. And we would be like on the other side and the helicopter would go. And there was a couple that, no, there weren't any multiples while we were there. It was all singles, but day after day after day after day. And they made no attempt to shut anything down.
Yeah.
They would talk, people, the seasoned, seniors, not the word, but the more experienced base jumpers tried to slow everybody down and just, have some more talks about safety and a realistic understanding of your expectations and experience. But the exit point was right there. And if you wanted to go put your feet up on the edge, they weren't going to stop you.
Yeah.
It was bizarre. For a couple of reasons. One, you saw that, and then now retrospectively looking at it after what happened with Alex, dying just a few weeks ago, and we were kind of texting on this on the phone. It's amazing the level of I describe base jumping as walking on a razor blade.
Okay.
And your feet might actually be bleeding, but you might not notice it because it's just this insidious cut, and you get used to tolerating just a little bit more risk.
Yeah. Just
a little bit more danger. I mean, if 12 people go in a valley that you're in, that's cause for sitting back on your heels for a little bit and considering. And Alex and I did the opposite. Because, what I was thinking in the back of my head? You know what? It's not going to happen to us. I mean, if I'm being totally honest, that's the thought that I had in the back of my head. It's not going to happen to us.
Oh, he did this, or, or whatever.
You justify yourself off of that razor blade.
Yep.
And you justify the other person onto the blade with a deeper cut. And the reality is, I think you might have equally as deep of a cut and be in that spot. It's so freaking hard to objectively look in and realize that you're at that spot.
Oh God. And especially if there's some collective momentum around you, know, with other people who are jumping or other people who are, they were able to, in order to sort of preserve their, rationale, if you were.
That happened because of.
Yes.
It's the because of, and that won't happen to me. It's again, rabbit hole.
Yeah. But it's also true for climbing. And the thing is, I mean, in Chamonix, one of the reasons that I went there partially was because the very best guys in the world who were doing what I wanted to do were there.
Yep.
And if I was going to stay in the Cascades, I mean, there were good climbers in the Northwest, but and a couple of them, broke out, went to the greater ranges. I mean, actually many of them, but I just couldn't. I needed to be around people who were much, much better and a higher concentration of them, and just seeing the shit that was going down in Chamonix at the time was pretty incredible. But I mean, I got there on accident. My first trip to Europe, first trip basically out of the North America, was to go try and climb the north face of the Eiger with John Krakauer. He had pitched the idea and a story and had, basically all expenses covered by Outside Magazine to go over and climb that and, basically, write the story of it, because it is one of the most iconic faces in the world. I mean, the thing is legit 6,000 vertical from the, top to the bottom. Another, rolling hill distance down into Grindelwald. I mean, when you're up on that face and looking out, I mean, you can hear cowbells and it sounds super fucking peaceful down there.
Yeah.
But it's down there, and that's not where you are. And by the time we got there, I mean, I don't know how many motherfuckers have been killed, but on that face, but it's falling apart. I mean, it's the rockfall hazard can be extreme, and I can't remember how many people perished before the first ascent in 1938, and but a lot of people, and so Face has a big reputation.
Yep. There's a jump off of it.
There's a jump. I have actually filmed that jump.
Yep.
Let's see. One of the first, I think, the first snowboard exit off of the West Face. A guy named Dominique Glez would have been 92.
And just for clarity, you're talking about a snowboard base jump?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Why not just pair things up?
Yeah. you get enough speed to get a little distance out from the wall.
Sure, what could possibly go wrong?
He'd only jumped one. He jumped the Croix de Fer, which is down valley from Chamonix, before on skis. And the skis don't catch as much air when you take off. So he built a big ass jump, and went off and he tossed the laundry, right as the skis, jettisons the poles, the skis start to lift up, to creep. And so on that jump he tossed and, got out fine, pretty violent opening. Nobody did the math on larger surface area, et cetera, of a snowboard. So when I have some pretty shocking still images of when he left the snow, and I mean basically tried to do a little donkey kick with the snowboard. So now the air has caught the top, has caught the deck because it's up, and so he basically opened head down with the snow, with the board above his head.
He was feet high, head low.
He was feet high, head low. Thing opened, hit the snowboard on the way to opening, so he opened facing the wall. Managed to, get shit right because the guy's got a ton of fucking experience. And, went down and landed in the meadow, and we're just like...
Thought about his life choices for a little bit?
For a long time, actually, because we had some miscommunication about who was going to pick him up, and, somebody thought that somebody else had got him and this and that. And so he was just hanging out in Grindelwald or Alpa Glen or someplace.
Yeah. Which there are worse places to hang out.
Yeah. But anyway, so I got to the North Face of the Eiger with Krakauer. We got there on the late in the year. We sat out 3 weeks of the wettest September since like the mid 1800s. And our tents got destroyed by the fun that blew in, and then, I mean, it was diabolical weather. Absolutely fucking great experience. And it was also the place where I learned how good I was, because there was, and I don't know if I ever really, I think I wrote about it somewhere, but John Kraken, he had a lot more big mountain experience than I had. So I was counting on him to say, look, we need a 3-day weather forecast, of good weather minimum. 5 would be better. It's not going to take us 5, but it's going to, you got the first day of good weather, you wait for the face to clear. Second day, you start up and maybe you summit on the third day, depending on, the tactics you're using. But partway through that, there was like a day and a half good weather forecast, or 2 days or something. And I left this party in the middle of the night, decided I'm going to go solo the North Face of the Monk. Because I'd been drinking wine and thought that mixing some painkillers from the first aid kit might be good with that. And then really good ideas generally follow in the wake of that kind of behavior. And so I went back to the tent and packed and put my headlamp on and started walking towards the face, and popped into 2 crevasses just to the waist on the way to the bottom of the face. While it was still dark, woke up, looked back down, or I didn't not wake up, but when the sun came up, I looked back down at what my fucking tracks through the glacier, and like, well, that wasn't the smartest way to get up here, but it was dark, so I do excuse that. I can't go back down, or I won't, because I'm no longer impaired in my decision-making capacity, so I'll just solo this route that Dougal Haston made the first ascent of, And it was sort of what one would call an alpine ice / frozen waterfall type route. And, got up, got down, made the last train down from the Jungfraujoch back to Kleine Scheidegg. And
Kleine Scheidegg. There's a great jump. You get off that train stop there.
Oh,
then you walk down a little bit.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, but to be continued.
Yep.
On that. I'm trying to think of what that might be. But yeah, that whole area. I mean, anyway, so I get back down, and Krakauer and I, we eventually get a good weather forecast and start up, and there's just too much snow. I mean, it has dumped so much fucking snow. Christophe Profi and Sylviane Tavernier, his girlfriend at the time, started up the face, I guess the day after us. So they had given the face a day to clear. We got up to basically the second, the very base of this, climbed through the ice hose, got to the base of the second ice field, realized this is going to take forever. This is just the upper face is, if it's this bad here, it's stupid to continue. We crossed paths with Christoph on the way. They were headed up, we were going down, and then they turned around at a certain point, realizing, okay, we need to wait. And Profi came back. He waited a long time. He came back 10 days later, I think, and climbed the face in a day with Bruno Cormier. But we met him in the restaurant at Kleine Scheidegg afterwards, and he said, "Oh, you should go to Chamonix, sometime." And so I think we exchanged information or something like that. And then Krakauer was like, "Well, the weather's, I've been here 3 weeks. I don't have time to wait longer." So he went home. I caught a train to France and soloed 5 big routes in the next 3 weeks. And it was the best because of how wet September was. And then it was like fucking good weather for 5 months or whatever. I mean, it was insane. So it was the best ice season I've ever seen in Chamonix, before or since. Well, not before because it was my first time, but in all the years, I don't think it was ever that good. And so I fell on the perfect conditions, and had just enough contact with people in town to feel like I could go back there eventually. And after at one point I was thinking I would try and stay the winter, figure out, the illegal busboy job or whatever.
Yep.
Didn't fucking speak any French, didn't have anything, had one pretty bad experience on the north face of the Grand Charmeuse, and decided, it's time for you to leave.
Yep.
Because the trajectory was super steep, like from the easy route on the Triangle du Tacoul to the Gabrou Couloir to the Super Couloir, north face of Lake Court, and then to Solin. I mean, it was just like, okay, this is unsustainable to keep going, progressing at this rate.
Yeah.
And so I got a ticket home.
How many years were you into climbing at this point?
I'll just say, I say that was my 4th season.
So, I mean, as far as a seasoned climber, that's ridiculously early in a career, I would assume.
I think it depends on where you are, your background. It was ridiculously early for me, having come from the Cascades and not done a ton of no big alpine routes like that, essentially. Like
it's tough to describe the difference in topography between the Cascades and Chamonix, or even the mountains in Switzerland. It's almost, just go to Google, put in the Cascade Mountains and then Mont Blanc.
Yeah, and
you're going to notice a difference.
The first Cascade mountain you'll see is Mount Rainier. That's a volcano, and that'd be the famous one. There's a lot of really good, hard technical climbing in the Cascades, but the infrastructure is just not there. Yeah. Like the cool routes, you're hiking a day to get to, whereas the cool routes in Chamonix, you're on a cable car for 5 minutes.
Well, don't forget the espresso and brat stop.
Well, yeah, excuse me. It does sometimes take a little time to get there.
Correct.
But so yeah, it was pretty early in my career. I already knew that I was good, and that season in the Alps basically reinforced that. And I was 22 years old.
Wow.
Essentially, I think that was the thing that I'd written in my notebook at the time, was like 22 was just a preview, and in one more year, I'm going to bust this shit wide open.
Which is what you did.
I get, yeah.
I'm going to say you did.
Yeah.
And I'm not even steeped in climbing, but I
I just had a bigger. I mean, I like to. There was a lot better climbers than me, for sure, active in that area. Many of them were there. I mean, to run into the year after. So let's see. The concept of the enchainment had just sort of been born in a sense, and that basically came from the guys who were living in Chamonix, had climbed fucking everything already, and they're just like, these mountains aren't getting any taller. Have you ever noticed that if you climb the north face of Les Droits and you go down the south face, that it puts you at the base of the north face of the Aiguille du Telefre? And if you climb the north face of the Telefre and you descend off the backside, that it puts you at the base of the Grand Jurasse? Like, why don't we just string these things together? And so the winter of '84, partially because of that good ice season, Profi had done just that. He sold the north face of Les Droits, got down the backside. I think he did it in the winter, but got down the backside, puts right at the base of the Telefre, did that, and then sold the shroud in the Grand Jurasse and dropped down into Italy and, hitched a ride back through the tunnel to get home. And so that this started building up, okay, what would be the cool things to do? So the summer of '85, he climbed the north face of the Matterhorn, north face of the Eiger, and the north face of the Grand Jurasse, back to back with helicopter liaisons in between. And it was and did it in just under 24 hours. He wanted to do the Walker Spur on the Grand Jurasse, but by the time he got there, I mean, that would be the one you'd start with probably because it's the hardest of those routes, which later iterations of this idea did start that way. But and that just blew my fucking mind. I was there that summer when that happened, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. Like, I'd done the north face of the Eiger that summer with the rope and two guys. I'd climbed the Walker Spur in a day, but had to sleep on top because it was kind of a long day. Yeah. So we bivouacked in the hole. And part of that was, the tourist season. There's like the last day of July and we climbed the Walker Spur. I think we passed 30 people on the route and slept in a fucking hole on top with 12 others. I mean, just overcrowding was an issue. So the very best guys were there, and that's why I ended up there, and that's the only reason that for me it developed. I spent 3 weeks there in '84, 4 months in '85. I was there for about 6 weeks in 1986. And
are you pushing the needle incrementally every one of those years? You're going back, taking the enchainment. Well, like when one of the things I love the most about the type of climbing you used to do is just the ridiculously lightweight, hard ass push. And I mean, that description that I just gave it doesn't do it justice. Some of the stuff that I've read about the pushes you've done or the pictures you have of yourself at the end of those things. I mean, obviously you have to work up to that. So every year, were you going back and just pushing the gas pedal a little bit more?
Yes. And I was in the beginning, I was, more interested in developing my technical ability and finding my way around the range. Because if you're going to start, like, the enchainments only become a possibility when you know the shit by, like, the back of your hand.
It's not going to happen if you're lost.
Exactly. and or don't know that for me to get, I eventually in 1990 did one of the new routes that I did there was the Richard Cranium Memorial that I climbed with Barry Blanchard, and I'd already we got on top and it was dark and Barry wanted to bivouac and I'm like, dude, I've already done this. I've already rehearsed this descent. Because I'm smart like that. Because I'm a fucking chess player. So I already know where all the rappel anchors are here. We can get down in the dark. We can sleep. And if we just get down to that, to the Couvercle hut, we can people will have left food there and there are beds and blankets. And so I'm not fucking sleeping out. That's like so Canadian Rockies.
Canadian Rockies.
Which was where Barry cut his teeth, and another arguably a great range. And he, had more sort of big mountain fucked up scenario experience, at that time than I did. Some of those big mountain fucked up experiences that he had were with me, but he had many more before that. And a lot of that is because of the nature of the Canadian Rockies, another mountain range that's trying to fall down. And the fact that when you're doing stuff there, you are so far from the possibility of rescue that it,
You're on your own.
You're on your own.
Get out on your own power.
I mean, back at that point, eventually, the sort of short haul helicopter rescues, thing came to the Canadian Rockies. But at that time, when those guys were pushing, it took them 5 tries, I think, to climb the Wild Thing on the east face of Mount Catherine, like legit attempts with very serious guys.
Yeah.
And so these things that they were doing were super hard but didn't have the speed component, and that was the big thing in the Alps, was the speed ascents. And stuff, not like starting a stopwatch, and it's just like not I'm going for the record necessarily. It's just like I'm really fucking good at this.
Yeah.
And so therefore my speed record is a consequence of my ability and my imagination, my open mind. And some of the stuff, if anybody's like watched what happened on the nose of El Cap in the last month, there was specifically a 1 week period where that speed record got broken fucking every day for 5 days or something.
Did it really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think finally they went sub 2 hours.
How high is that climb?
3,000 vertical, I think.
And if you've never tried climbing, to say that that's accomplished in 2 hours, like I don't know. It'd be like somebody who has no experience flying trying to get behind the controls of the space shuttle. There's a lot lost in the description of how difficult that is.
Yeah, you can't, like, and even if you described meticulously everything that those two guys had done, to reach that point, fuck.
Yeah, you're missing. You're still missing 98% of what it actually the experience is.
Yeah, and also the synergistic effect of those two guys. Just like unbelievable. But so the stuff that was going down in the Alps put me on more of a speed trip than a technical difficulty trip, and that happened for a variety of reasons. I would have been a much better climber if I'd really just given in and spent a lot of time at the rock climbing crag and developed my technical rock climbing ability. But I didn't, because I was into different shit. And to the extent where I thought there was stuff that some thoroughly non-recommendable things, that I would not say to somebody, oh yeah, you should try and climb the south face of Mont Blanc from the first cable car. Don't do it. I did it. I got away with it. I almost didn't. But but basically you take the first cable car, and in summertime or whatever, that's maybe 7 a.m. Maybe you get on the workers if you're plugged in. You get on the workers one at 6:30 or whatever. Yeah. Still, that means you're going to arrive at the south face of Mont Blanc to the sun will have been up for a long time, which is generally not the sun hits the snow starts to melt, and snow melts, and that unfreezes some shit, and then some stuff sometimes falls down. And in any case, I was just trying to get faster and faster and faster, and part of the getting faster was reducing the weight that was being carried.
Well, you have limited options, and that is probably the number one go-to.
Yeah, and the thing is, you start limiting the options, you sort of increase your freedom in a way because anything becomes possible. I like to say that we were on this quest to find out how light is too light. Yeah, and not in terms of this climbing harness weighs 1 ounce, or that not that too light, but the aggregate of what you're carrying in the mountains. And sadly, the answer to that will never be known, because the people who learn the answer don't come back. Yeah. And, you could do an inventory afterwards, and you're like, they should have carried, if they just had this, the battery.
And again, that's hypothetical. It's the same thing with jump fatalities. You can hypothesize as to what happened.
Yeah.
Was it a gear issue? Was it a decision issue? But dead men tell no tales.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
And there are some, and unfortunately, when they die alone, then the lesson, there is no, just, there's no ability to learn from it in a way. And I had this discussion's come up a lot for me, just because, I chose to walk away, totally quit cold turkey. And
what year was that you made that choice?
2000.
Okay.
So we're skipping over a bunch of shit. If I
talked
about the back end,
you got to talk about the books. You got to talk about Gravel.
but my duty is that as I see it is to transmit the lessons.
Yes,
because I did come back.
Yep.
And there was enough people who didn't, that the guys that had fucking secret knowledge, guys that could have shared, and the thing is, I mean, if you're talking about 12 fatalities in a week,
like 10 days,
basically in 10 days in Lauterbrunnen, so the average. The funny thing is, like in Chamonix, somewhere between 40 and 60 annual in the mountains. A lot of that data at the time was skewed because some of that's like someone with no mountain experience tripping and falling off the trail.
Yep.
It's not like dudes seriously pushing it, but the number of quality people who were seriously pushing it, who like didn't come back, is fucking it's unheard of. In a concentrated area like that.
Yep.
Like any of that stuff, if one season of that happened in the U.S. in a national park or whatever.
Oh, imagine it happening in Yosemite.
Fucking banned. I mean,
Yeah.
everything would be banned. Like, I'm sorry, you have to stay in, you don't even get to fucking drive here anymore. You have to get on a fucking tourist bus at the edge of the park. So we'll drive you in and we'll handcuff you to the fucking seat. So all you get to do is see out the windows because, God forbid, you step out and sprain your fucking ankle.
I bet you they would shut down Yosemite if 30 people died on the face in a season.
Oh, yeah.
They would lose their mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that rightfully so? Yes. In our culture, in our society, yes, because people can't fucking handle it. And, think that, yes, let's just say life is sacred and I'd rather be alive, but that's because I am. I don't know. Maybe dead is great. Maybe it's awesome. I don't know.
I'm going to try to find out a long time from now.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I'm not in a rush to determine that.
But you got to be ready. As Doug Scott said, you got to be ready for it anytime.
Yep.
And, the reason I'm not into death is because I'm alive right now. But to have the number of guys that were really fucking good and cutting edge stuff. I mean, some of the early paraglider flights were, cross country flying is basically being invented at that time. Bruno Cormier, who started Vertical magazine, he burned in that way. Escoffier's, first accident happened in an automobile, but that is the secondary one was paragliding because he got all fucked up in the car and couldn't do what he wanted to do anymore. Marco Pedrini was using a sheet bend at the anchor so he could rappel on a single line, which is basically, as long as the knot stays weighted, it's solid. As soon as you unweight it, it fucking unties itself. Yeah. And so you accidentally unweight halfway through a rappel because of something. Okay, so there goes.
Taking the express elevator down on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and any number of guys, and then when the whole base thing started.
So when you were going through that time period before you walked away in 2000, obviously you were in this community, which I'm assuming is small, much like the base jumping world. It's easy to buy a T-shirt, but there's a lot of people who have the T-shirt. Then there's a subculture of people who do it at a recreational casual level.
Okay.
Then there's a subculture, and each one of these subcultures gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yes.
So you have the casual participant, then you have the person who's very, very serious, and then you have the person who is probably making a living and is a pro. I would say, you were in the pro world for sure. When those people in that small circle that you knew or peripheral to, when they would die, how would that affect your mentality going into the mountains? Or how would that affect how you approached the fact that you were going to go and continue doing the same thing that took their life?
It affected me differently during different eras of my career, let's say, or different parts of my career. Because the first one, the first reaction is like, okay, if it's people, especially, let's say I don't know them so well, but the peripherally, acquaintance, met them in the magazine office, this, that, whatever. First part is like, I'm involved in this really cool thing. Because
People are dying.
Because it's,
I get it. There's the same
I'm
draw to the base jumping world too. Like, well, yeah, it's awesome. Can't you tell how awesome it is? Look, these people are dropping dead doing it.
Yeah.
There is, in total transparency and honesty, there is that draw. You feel that draw.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
And that sort of, in some ways, it sort of legitimizes the pursuit of the activity in some way, in like the young male ego thing.
Is there one of those?
I
have no experience with that whatsoever.
Touche. Yeah, I mean, it's relevant for sure. There's that, and then there's the period of like trying to hyperanalyze stuff. We're like, okay, I've gotten close a few times, know, and I could say that, I mean, the accidents for me that the ones that were, right on the cusp of being fatal, generally, there's nothing I could have known other than to not be there.
Yep.
Known better, I guess.
Yep.
But there was no secret knowledge that would have said, okay, yeah, if the ice, the inch thick ice over rock that your feet are on, if that plate goes away and your feet don't, are scrabbling down the rock, and you just immediately transfer all your weight to your ice tools because they're going to be both solid, and one of those pulls, and you're left hanging by one tool 2,500 feet off the deck, which is irrelevant because 500 is plenty, 100 is plenty, 50 is plenty.
Yeah.
It doesn't fucking matter in that situation. There's nothing there other than to not be there. Like there was no thing like, oh, I should have had a different brand of ice tool, or I should have done this, or I should have done.
It's just a consequence of the activity.
It's built in. And so there was a period there where, that won't happen to me because he did X, Y, and Z wrong, and I've only ever done X, and so I'm not going to die. There are mental gymnastics required to continue playing at that level.
Yeah.
If you actually value your own life, which certainly during that point in my career, I was accused of not having a real, value for my life because I was doing shit that it would appear from the outside, especially. I mean, even within the culture of, in Chamonix, okay, the dude's fucking soloing at a really hot, pretty high level with some frequency. They could look, in on that and go, okay, that's ridiculous. That's an untenable trajectory. We've all seen it before, and he's destined for the ground.
They start throwing the odds at you. Yeah, he did it now. He's getting away with it now, but eventually he'll do it enough times, and something's not going to go in their favor.
Exactly.
Yep.
And because there is I always used to describe it as a bank account full of luck. But you don't know, what the balance is, ever. It's finite, you know that.
That's an amazing way to describe that. And there's no button that says check balance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can, and you don't know how you're making deposits, but as long as you're getting away with it, you're convinced that you're making deposits into it. But at some point, it runs out. It will, and because it has for. Virtually everyone in on one scale or another. So it's super cool. Now they get to the point where no, it's not going to be, that'll never happen to me because, and then just infinite. And sometimes there's a little bit of anger in there. You dumb motherfucker. We've had this like. When guy I climbed with a lot, Philippe Moore, died in January of 1990, or 90, sometime back then, 90, 91-ish. And he and I had done a lot of simul soloing together, which basically means you're going up on these routes, climbing together, but with no rope in between you, no hardware, no nothing. You just
taking the same route though. Okay.
Yeah, and you'd have like a psychological safety net a little bit.
Yeah.
You kind of
because it's way safer with a friend.
Oh,
base jumping's not like that at all.
Oh yeah.
You know how much better it feels to stand there next to somebody and look over and see that they're freaking out a little bit. You're like, okay.
Do you know how much better it feels to not be by yourself?
Yes.
And questioning whether this is a wise activity. Because if other people are doing it, well, clearly if I assign them some, greater intelligence than I have.
Yeah.
If they're doing it, well, then of course it's safe for me, or whatever. Just like the even if it's an illusion, the distribution of risk, which is not how I look at it necessarily. It can be a thing if you have safety equipment.
Yeah.
But in that situation, the distribution of risk, it is an illusion. It's just like, hey, we're both here, rolling the dice together. And
the only safety net that's there is actually not a safety net. Hopefully one person would be able to survive to pass on what had happened.
Yeah.
And maybe learn a lesson.
Or maybe tell someone else that, hey, you can't just pull on every first placement of the ice tool. Like, before you remove the other ice tool, test that one. And this was a thing that happened with Philippe, is that he was on a very sharp, very steep trajectory, climbing-wise. When he died, I was actually in Seattle. I'd gone home for the holidays and got, I wasn't the one to field the phone call. It was my wife at the time and somebody from she was working at the Patagonia store in Chamonix at that time, and somebody from the office called her at home in Seattle and said, hey, you should probably be the one to tell Mark. So he was up on the Aiguille Saint-Nom trying to climb a new route with Francois Marcini, and there's a big ice field in the middle of it, and it's 55 degrees, 50 degrees, 60, whatever, not steep. I mean, it's terrain you should be able to run on in the right conditions. But Philippe had this tendency of swinging the tool and basically pulling on it before he knew that.
He'd load it?
He'd load it, yeah. I mean, before testing. And part of the, whole idea of 3 points of contact at all times, et cetera, it's a rule that would maybe get broken, flagrantly at times.
Yep.
By all of us, certainly. In whatever situation you think you get away with it in. But he at some point, he swung the tool, and it was, midwinter, hard black ice, no snow over the top, thing dinner plated, knocked one of his feet out or whatever. Francois never, they were unroped. Francois, heard the, merde.
Yeah.
And then looked, we didn't see the exact thing, but basically there was a big dinner plate out of the ice where he
saw
had
the
been.
Aftermath, yeah.
And then Philippe went 700 meters.
Damn.
Yeah. And then Francois, who was up there by himself, had to climb out to a situation where he could shoot a flare, get the helicopter to come get him. And that's basically how, when the route that he was not in a good spot. The pitch, I later climbed the pitch that he had to solo to get to a place where the helicopter could get him. I was like, dude, in that headspace after watching my partner pitch,
I was going to say, plus with the emotional,
no, if I,
to watch something like that happen and then have to a mandatory performance to get to a place,
yeah,
or you're going to join him.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a heady task for sure.
And so there was like this, and those are the kind of things like that would never happen to me. Because there was a comment, there were comments made, interchange back and forth where I'm trying to teach him, because I realize this dude is,
Yep.
he's going faster than he should, in a way, which was the same thing that was said of me, because and I would go back and say like, yeah, I did basically 5 years worth of climbing in a compressed into a 2-year period, but I still only had 2 years of experience. That wisdom of that did not become apparent till much later in my career, where I came to the conclusion that, man, in order to have 10 years of experience, you got to have all fucking 10 years.
Yeah.
Because the wisdom of those lessons you can have, you can do all of the climbing, you can do all of the training, all of the reading, the conversations, the this and that. You can accelerate but experience takes fucking time, and you're not going to.
You'll never get that experience if you're too far over the bars, is what I describe it.
Yes.
And the problem is you're still on the bike and you just don't realize you're that far over the bars until you tap something with the front wheel.
Yeah.
And then it's too late. Yeah, I've seen it happen time and time again.
Yeah. And so ultimately, after going through that won't happen to me because he did this and this wrong, it just became about the sadness. and the fact of like, wow, these are my peers. These are some of my best friends. These are guys that,
They're your family.
yeah, and in a sense, it's chosen family. The family I chose, the group that I chose, and it's not unreasonable to predict that this is going to be a thing. That that it's going to dwindle. There was at some point in the late '90s, I went back to Chamonix to do a photo shoot for somebody, and got together at dinner with Andy Parkin was there. I think François Marcini was there, Alain Gersen, and we were sitting around the table, and I looked at him and I'm like, we're kind of the only ones left, huh? I mean, as shit as that
I know
sounds, and it wasn't.
I mean, that's dark and morbid, but I know exactly the headspace that you're coming from.
Yeah, and it didn't go when I first quit climbing was basically around that time.
Yeah.
Where I was like, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna retire, because I'm sick and tired of fucking my friends dying, and turns out that even if I don't go climbing, they do.
Say that, yeah.
And that was right about the time that I got the pitch or the idea from somebody. It could have been the publisher to write Extreme Alpinism, and that's actually writing that book. As soon as I sat down and started writing that book, I'm like, fuck, I have so much knowledge about this stuff. Some of it, I can pass on now because I've been tinkering with shit, for years, especially when it came to clothing systems and the physical training piece of it and that kind of thing. So I realized how much I knew and that I should actually go back and apply it, and then sort of, I would say, like phase 2 of my climbing career, where we really tried to that's when we really tried to push the boat out. I mean, I don't know sort of what more to say on that, other than Extreme Alpinism was meant to be a how-to book, but it really is a how not to book.
Yeah,
because there's some, it's like, hey, I got to come back, and here's what I learned on this fucked up situation, or what I learned on, and
I think those are more valuable books than how-to, by the way.
Oh, fuck yeah.
If I had a choice between, hey, this is the how-to and this is the things that you should avoid, I'm going to start with the things that I should avoid and then overlay that, hopefully gain knowledge onto the how-to.
Onto the how-to part,
better understanding and just a better lens of how-to.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'd rather know what I shouldn't do first, because that it's not necessary. That's not what you shouldn't do is rarely included in
the how-to.
The how-to, yeah.
If like ever, I would say.
Generally, yeah. It could be that.
So in there, Gravel came in there as well too, right? Before 2000?
No, that started so they Gravel, specifically Giacchino Gabbi, had been one of my early sponsors when I was living over there, and so I had a relationship, and I don't know totally how it I think the French distributor introduced us or whatever, and anyway, Giacchino saw something in me and was like, I'll help this in some way. So I had a relationship dating, I think, I'm just going with 85, 86, somewhere in there, with that company. Climbed on their tools, for forever. And I was working on a book project for him. We were trying to do a thing. I was living in the States at the time, but I'd flown back over to Italy in early 2000. I think it was 2001. No, it couldn't have been. Had to be 2000. I was there working on this sort of we were trying to build a world timeline of climbing events that happen, first ascents, or huge jumps in technical ability, or things of that nature. The personnel involved, the technological parallels, like, was this a gear thing? Yeah. When you put front points, the 11th, 12th point on the crampons, it utterly changed ice climbing. I mean,
I can see why.
It turns out
I'm not
that
a nice climber, but I could see that a pointy end of your toe might potentially help
Yes.
hold onto the ice.
Exactly. So, historically, there had been 10 points underfoot, and climbing up steep ice was limited by
Oh my gosh.
those body positions that you'd have, because the crampons evolved from nailed boots. I mean, it's crazy. So just the advent of the two front points basically allowed for the first ascent of the north face of the Eiger. And so really it goes back that far. And Gravel had been around making stuff, I mean, since the 1800s.
Wow.
So, from, and a variety of different steel implements. It didn't start with, okay, we're going to make ice axes, and these, recreational climbers who go around in the mountains are going to make us rich. They're making garden tools. Yeah. Essentially in the beginning, and so they had all the. So I was trying to build this whole timeline and chart, and it was going to become a book and this and that. But the North American distributor told Gravel at that point, "Hey, we're done. I'm going to shut it down." And they had been a good partner for Gravel for a long time, and I just thought, oh, well, I've been cobbling together, with multimedia presentations and sponsorship stuff and an existence in the States that allowed me to continue climbing. But I'd love to maybe do this, like distribute this stuff in the States, because then I could have a job that ended at 5:00 every day and I wouldn't have to take it home. But, and I thought somehow I would be okay being a middleman. Like, I'm buying it from Italy. I'm increasing its value by absolutely zero. And then increasing the price by, 40% or whatever, selling it on to someone else. Like, and ultimately that, we started, that business, our first, and got a guy. I realized, okay, I'm a good mouthpiece, but I'm not a business guy. So got a friend, Bill, who was working for Black Diamond at the time, and he brought a couple of other guys over, Mike from Black Diamond, and we started amassing debt in June of 2001. Our first day of business was like January 3rd, 2002. Something happened in between those two dates that basically meant starting a business with $500,000 worth of debt in an economical climate which is dying. Yeah. Due to circumstances
outside of our control.
Outside of our control, let's just say that. So yeah, the towers going down basically killed the outdoor market, and so we started with $500,000. The company, from 2002, till I finally shut the doors in 2008, the company was never out of debt, and to the point where it's refinancing the house, it's putting $10,000 each on a credit card to get through to make payroll. It's like, and part of that was, my business partner, Bill Giacchino, was a volatile character, and not someone that either of, he was basically my surrogate father in the very helpful to me for a long, long time. And I held he and his wife up as like the epitome of okay, this is how a marriage and sort of partnership should work. He was a very, very important person for me, but in that environment, was not great. And Bill found out quickly that he couldn't manage that relationship. And so he split, left me holding the reins. I'd like to say bag, but whatever. So I got to, be marketing and to try and manage the business aspect of it. It's just not my personality.
It's tough. Business is hard enough as it is. I think about you though every time I go into an REI, because they have the axes on the front door, the Gravel North America axes. Yeah, actually, it's true. It's true. That was actually a good sale. I think there, it was 2 for every fucking retail store that they decided to put it in. The first time I saw it and I grabbed it, I was like, "You've got to be shitting me!" And I immediately thought about you. I was like, "Damn, man." And it'd be like it'd be
sales 101. If you can put the product in their hand, you can
Yep.
get them to buy it, and so everybody who walks in, and if they have to pull the door open,
Yep.
the product was in their hand for just a second. And even though they're going in for,
Who doesn't need an ice axe? I mean, like you said, it is a good gardening tool.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
If you're not going to climb ice, maybe you're going to plant some lavender. It's hard to say what you could do with it.
Many things.
Yeah.
It's true. And that was coincident. I mean, one of the advantages that having that business gave me, I mean, plugged into the climbing industry and then helped develop, there was a point there where bids went out, the Marine Corps wanted to, change their climbing kits, the Marine Assault Climber Kit. And there was a company that had been providing, building those kits for them, assembling all the stuff. And I was like, oh, there's a fucking way smarter way to do this. And, if you get this stuff and then you hire us to train you how to use it, then are people. So there was a whole period there
Was that your first interaction and touch point with the military? Was it through Gravel?
No, actually. So the very first interaction came by way of shooting.
Really?
Yeah.
God damn it! Where in the story is shooting? You glossed over that. Because I know you love. I mean, I know you love shooting, and I knew that you did. I actually assumed that you picked up the passion for that after linking up with the military people, or something you were exposed to with them.
No, that
You're like an onion, Mark.
Being
many
able,
layers.
The smelly one that's been in the back of the fridge for a while, or
whatever. Pick whichever one you want.
Yeah, okay. I'm the one that makes the eyes water. It's like what I like. So part of the reason I lived in France from '88 to December '93. So I had 5 years. I basically spent 5 years there full time on a 90-day tourist visa.
Perfect.
Yeah,
You're not the only one, I'm sure.
I don't believe I was alone in that.
Yeah.
Believe it still might be happening. People spend lifetimes there on with no papers. And part of the reason for coming home was I had been back to the U.S. a few times, and man, I wanted to own a truck, and man, I wanted to actually not rent a place. And I'd been here. I was in Jackson doing a show of some kind. My friend Brent's Hawks. It's like, hey, we should go to the shooting range. I'm like, it's fucking stupid. You know, that's some Wyoming cowboy pretender shit, whatever I thought at the time. So just like with a podcast, this will never catch on.
Yep.
I thought, shooting, yeah, whatever, fine. It's bad weather. I can't go climbing. I'll go to the shooting range with you. And so he had like a couple handguns, Smith & Wesson 9 and a 44 Magnum revolver. So we go and we shoot a little bit, and I was instantaneously converted.
It's a common reaction.
And I went deep. I mean, right away, I started reading as much as I could, that. Within a year, I was shooting competitively, and then got plugged in because Lisa's brother is a guy, is a competitive shooter, and earned his Grand Master title with a single stack 45. Wow. Which was a big deal back in the day. Like, not a lot of Grandmasters running around the States who were, it was to shoot Grandmaster category now. I mean, they're all high cap guns. They're, it's hybrids of some kind, whether it's iron sighted stock, quote unquote, stock gun. Still, I mean, I think the 40 cal stock guns at the time were, 20+1 or something like that. And so to, even a 10 round mag was a rarity when Dave earned his Grandmaster thing. So that means you basically start in each shooting stage, and the shooting stages were, not high cap stages like they are now.
Yeah.
But, and so I got introduced to Dave, and then via Dave, who shot on the Super Squad with guys like, at the time, the hitters in practical shooting at the time were Rob Latham, who's basically still at the top of the fucking heap.
Yep.
Brian Enos, Ron Avery, Jerry Barnhart, Todd Jarrett was still probably 2 years in the future. But those, and some other guys that I didn't really know, but I got introduced to, Dave, he helped me out a little bit. And then I first met Brian Enos. I was on a range. I had a 2-day sort of thing that I was doing with Ron Avery, and to learn, because I wanted to get better, and I had access to these grandmasters via these personal relationships. So I met Brian there and then went on a trip to meet him in Arizona, met Robbie Latham, and started shooting a lot with Robbie also. And I shot with Brian a fair amount because he and I resonated on a totally different level. And he helped me a lot with my workflow, my systems, because the guy was a reloading fucking machine. I mean, it was amazing. He, helped me build. I spent 10 days with him and built a stock gun, and new ones, because I was moving up from a single stack 45. I wanted to
going
shoot.
deep
in
your journey.
I was on. Yes.
Which I don't know. One of the things I appreciate about you the most, I think, is your dedication to going deep. You have 2 speeds, deep and deep.
And maybe, yeah. I'd like to say
few people are like that, though. I see a lot of the times people, and maybe it's a time restraint, but they'll dabble, or put their toes in the kiddie pool. Even from, we haven't seen each other in 13 years. Watching from a distance, whether it's photography or the bike riding or the exercise science, like there's no doubt in my mind how committed and how deep you are. And I think it's one of the things, it truly is one of the things that I appreciate the most about you is maybe it's not even willingness to do that. It's just who you are. And I think that's such a rare commodity.
I can't help it.
Yeah.
I guess is all I can say.
It's the way you're wired.
Yeah. And I want to know I want to know the way.
Yeah.
And that really is what it comes down to is, and I can't get there with, even knee deep water. So I on the shooting thing, I went down that pretty deep and started, shooting a little bit more with Robbie. And then Robbie one day, he's like, "Oh, you're a climber. And I need to learn how to rappel." And so Robbie was teaching all the handgun skills to a particular group back at Fort Bragg.
Yep.
At that time. And so, and for one reason or another, for some of the urban work those guys were doing, he wanted to be able to rappel off the top of the building and see the scenarios that they might be confronting through their eyes rather, I'm going to get
like
in.
an outside observer, like a little Spider-Man action on the outside?
Well, no, not necessarily. Like, say these guys are doing a building entry.
Yeah.
They're coming from the top down.
Yep.
But he wanted to make entry, like not in an operational sense, but even in a training sense, to like be able to go to see what, okay, how could anything that I know help these guys in this situation?
No, he was being Spider-Man. He was watching from the outside.
Yeah.
I like this guy already.
Yeah. And an amazing guy, and it developed into something pretty interesting for me. So so my connection, my first military interaction of any kind was behind the fence at Fort Bragg.
Not a bad entry point.
Yeah. Robbie introduced me to William Carlson, aka Chief Carlson. And they were kind of interested. Oh, he's a climber. Oh, and so here, we'll host him. We'll come back. We'll see. We'll fucking just wring him out like a sponge. Like, come for 5 days. Give us everything you got. Basically the style thing. Because that's how at the time, the long-term relationships with subject matter experts wasn't really a thing within the military yet. And so I went back there, and I was sporting the crew cut at the time, and I carried a gun everywhere. That was appreciated. The fact that I could hold my own on the range was basically what gave me entrance into...
That was your bona fides,
yes,
for sure.
Exactly. Because, a lot of those guys, spend a lot of time behind the gun, but I had spent a lot of time behind the pistol also. And
they definitely weren't expecting it.
No.
Probably the first time you stepped up to the range. Yeah.
No. And ultimately that earned, it's like, oh, he's a climber. Okay, he fucking has a hacky sack and smokes a lot of weed or whatever. But then I'd show up, and I can actually, I can fucking clean the plate rack in respectable time, and I could, they could put up whatever scenario on the pop-up range they wanted, and I could handle it because I'd been seeing these types of things through competition, and so that developed into the 5-day package there, and then we had a group of guys come out for 10 days to Colorado, where I was living at the time, and to teach. Well, I like to say that with that trip, I taught them how to walk, because they had. Their assignments at that point, this was 1999, so their assignments in their brief at that point was all urban. And so to take them outside into that world was eye-opening for them and for me, because it gave me the knowledge. It was reassuring to me to realize, like, oh, wait, I do know a lot about this shit, and it could actually be useful. And this, is pretty important work for me, because I was born with a passport that allows me to go, or at the time allowed me to go pretty much anywhere. I was born into sort of middle class, upper middle class economic thing. I'm fucking white. I had all of these privileges that I never paid for. I think I put them to pretty good use, but all the work with the military then took on a lot of greater meaning for me, because it was a way to actually pay for, to buy my ride that I had been on already.
Yeah.
And then to talk to them, with those guys, a little bit about some of the shit that they'd done, where, I thought climbing was fucking cool. And then start to realize, like, well, it's not the coolest thing, because if we're talking about, risk and this sort of thing, the mountains are only going to kill you in 5 different ways. And if you get a pretty good handle on that, then you can, and you're aware, and you don't get the short straw, you're likely going to come, you're probably going to make it. Maybe.
Yeah,
probably not. I don't know. It depends how deep you go. But some of the stuff that these guys were talking about having done, especially later, the post 9/11 stuff, it's just fucking like, okay.
Which is where your knowledge, I think, was so critical. You describe it as teaching guys how to walk, having been on the receiving side of, so you get issued a backpack, and then these are the things you have to take with you, and really you figure out on your own, well, where should I put this in my bag? There's like some broad guidelines.
Sure.
And like you just stuff it on your bag, because I don't know, I got issued and told I have to bring all these things. And then you throw a ridiculous amount of weight on your back.
Yeah.
With no experience. And I would just call it scrambling or bouldering, or, because you want to talk about the useful application. Just take a little trip to Afghanistan and look around a bit. You'll
notice some mountains.
Yes. And you're going to be heavy at a base altitude of sometimes 7,000 feet before you start. And I mean, I remember when I first was doing that stuff, we had no experience to your level of knowledge. So I would imagine not only you taught them how to walk, but probably how to pack.
I mean, there was a good progression there. I mean, and later with, started with the Army and later Navy. I mean, in the end, I worked basically with every Tier 1 SMU, yeah.
Yep. Alphabet soup.
Alphabet soup. Yeah. Plus, and then the sort of groups from the, similar level groups from the intelligence side. Yep. And this and that. So I did very little work on the white side after initial introduction to the Navy, but the knowledge that was passed on, and later the R&D projects that happened out of that were things like, okay, this is why I'm fucking here. This is why I can't, what's in my head, what I can share, how I can improve survivability, but like just even quality of life, whatever,
or efficiency.
And so you put guys that first October trip, it snowed a bunch in Colorado, but not enough. And so one of the first days was like, okay, we're just going to go hike up Green Mountain, and, I'm going to take these guys off trail a little bit, and we'll go. And so there's 6 inches of snow over like broken talus, kind of rocky terrain or whatever. Yep. So it's not enough to stand on, but it's enough to hide the elephant traps where you can like punch through and break your ankle. And it's not enough, it's just enough to make everything slippery and fucked, and to make like choosing a route through this, quote, minefield, unquote, impossible until someone goes through and tells you pretty much not, where not to walk.
Yep.
And it made me realize, like, okay, so we've been working on how light is too light. So, trying to do this gear equipment reductionism, and realizing that, hey, the greater our skill is, the less weight I have to carry for potential eventualities, if you will. So I came up, part of the teaching point for me was, what if weighs a lot. if you're answering, what if with equipment, yeah, you're going to be minimum 80 pounds on your back going out the door. And
if you're lucky.
If you are lucky. Exactly.
Yeah. Because what if weighs a ton?
It's a fucking ton. But then skill, experience, and courage weigh nothing, and you have them with you all the time.
Yep.
Like that's the shit you didn't leave back in the rear, when you went forward. And so this is, these were a lot of the conceptual things that I was teaching. And plus we'd done a lot of work figuring out how to, keep going for 24 or 36 or 40 hours nonstop at that point. And so I had a pretty good handle on the nutrition piece, which no one there had, no one was thinking about at that time because fitness wasn't a concept.
I was going to say, we're getting close to where you and I actually met. I'm liking where this is trending.
and I didn't teach a fitness piece to that particular organization until later, because I wasn't, necessarily. I had a piece in the mountain mobility group literature, which I think was called relevant fitness at the time, because I didn't know what else to call it. But I had just, there's a full on, basically 18 to 22 week periodized program in extreme alpinism, which was published that same year in 1999. And I go back and look at that training program that I put together for what we were doing in the mountains. And there's not a ton that I would change even today, despite, it being basically 20 years in the future.
Yeah.
Because some of those concepts were, universal and appropriate. And so I was, I'd teach them some of that stuff, but we didn't actually run seminars of movement knowledge or anything, because that for me came a bit later. But just the concepts of, okay, of applying, I'm going to build the foundation of endurance, and then everything's going to sit on top of that. And there were definitely some temperament kind of things with the guys. Like I definitely got got along better with the recce guys than I did with the door kickers, because look at me.
They also would probably inherently recognize the more applicability
of what I knew,
especially in that era, because we weren't walking extremely long distances yet, because we would just I got this flying device can land right there. But every time we land right there, no one's here.
Yeah.
Maybe we should walk farther. And then I bet you when the walking started to extend, people started paying a lot more attention to what you were saying.
Yeah. From sort of, even 2002 onward. So anything post 9/11, and every unit that went over to Afghanistan realized that the terrain that they were in was not accommodating. It was not at all
punishing.
Training on the fucking quad. So, so then the expertise and especially it became what developed sort of out of that. And I'd worked when I was climbing. I worked for a bunch of different manufacturers doing I'm a technical advisor. Sounds super fucking cool for, no, put the pocket here. Which, I worked on a lot of, ice tools, the actual hardware for the climbing, especially specifically from the ice climbing side with Gravel. And then a lot on clothing and packs. And so for those, name the company, I probably had some relationship with them at some point, but mostly at the time, I just finished Patagonia had come out with their regulator system of clothing, and it was all based on an idea of not protecting yourself from not trying to put yourself in a bubble when you're out in the environment, but integrating more with the environment. So what I called it was, okay, look, you're going to get wet. It doesn't matter. You can have, your breathable, your waterproof breathable laminate. You can have the highest tech fabric that you want. You're going to fucking get wet. So if that's a given, how do you handle that? Well, you want the system of clothing that dries the fastest as possible. And if you have a constantly self-drying system, it doesn't matter if it gets wet, because it's going to dry out. And if it's going to dry out just from your body heat alone, then okay, now we're in a situation where we truly can keep moving.
Yeah.
And if you start making decisions of like, okay, I have, in extreme alpinism, I came up with the concept of the action suit. So whenever I'm moving and generating heat, I'm very lightly dressed. And as soon as I stop in static, that's when I'm going to puffy up. And the concept of the belay coat came from that. It's just like all of these, a lot of this clothing stuff was developed in sort of climbing outdoor world. And then I had a friend who was working at Natick on the soft special projects team. He had done the original Spear clothing system, I think.
Yeah, I remember it well.
And he was familiar with me from climbing and that sort of thing. And they invited me back and said, hey, we got to, and it started basically in March with a phone call from Afghanistan. Some dude on a sat phone calls my buddy Johnny and says, hey, we're freezing our fucking asses on. Like, thanks for the Spear system. It's better than nothing, but
it still sucks.
It's still, completely, we are completely unprepared for this environment. And so within a very short period of time from that phone call, I was back there working on a clothing system that was based on the Patagonia regulator system that I'd worked with Duncan Ferguson on, and Mark Galbraith and there was a lot of pretty smart people that came up with that system. But I went back, made a presentation, explained it, and the guy, Fred Chan, who was running that team at the time, he's just like, wow, this makes total sense. Why isn't anybody thinking like this? I'm like, because I'm fucking crazy. I don't know. Because the other thing didn't work, and I wanted to fix it. And
because you go deep.
Because I guess, yeah. So they got a bunch of money from Navy to develop this clothing system. It became what was known as PCU, Protective Combat Uniform, and we did everything. And through that whole process, from the materials to the design elements of the thing to teaching people how to use it.
That's an important step I think a lot of people miss. You can have great gear if you don't know how to use it properly. Like I personally have had some horrendous experiences in the outdoors because I'm wearing too much stuff and I start sweating, and then in my head it's like, oh no.
I just dug myself a nice hole.
I need to leave now. I need to get out of the field, or I need to get into a tent because I need to completely Control Alt Delete everything that I've just done.
Yeah.
Even though I had the best gear in the world, I was an idiot, which is, I think, what I'm known for anyway. So It's just kind of living up to my standard. But yeah, I mean, you could have all the best gear. You have to have that educational piece that goes with it.
Exactly. And we couldn't go around to every unit that it was getting issued to in person because we did talk about it. Like, how are we going to get this? I field a team of like 20 instructors to go around and teach all this shit. I'm like,
no thanks.
I don't think I could do it. So I think I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but basically within a year of starting work on it, it got issued to the Whiteside Navy because it was their money initially, and then it built on from there. So
it's amazing how fast the military can move when it's a crisis.
Yes. I mean, it was fucking crazy to watch it come together and to realize that also because of the fabrics we were using, there's some issues that with the Berry Amendment and that kind of thing, that all the materials had to come from of U.S. origin. Most of our fabric mills in the U.S. were shut down. There were two in the Milliken, I think, and Malden. There were the only two that could manufacture the materials that we needed to use. But it was the first time, I think, in history where the military had the most advanced clothing system in the world. The civilian side had always been ahead, but this was by bringing, what was at the forefront at the time with that regulator system and taking it into a military context and using, different materials, some of which actually turned out to be better than what was available offshore. So that happened, and then parallel to that, I did a clothing system for the guys behind the fence at Fort Bragg, the Mars system, and they had a bit more money and a bit more latitude, and so they could actually buy direct from a single manufacturer, and that I think was that particular clothing system really jump-started the Patagonia's government business, because they would realize like, oh wow, this would be useful for Forest Service. This will be useful for all kinds of, users, because they're fucking human beings and they're going to be out in the same environment. So why not put it together and supply it? So the relationship with the military through that early 2000s, mid 2000s, all the way essentially up to, I guess, I started working pretty exclusively with your former folks.
Place.
Dog
kennel.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a trip, and I don't know, fuck the year. I'm just going to go with 2003. They were doing a trip on Mount Hood. I think they were doing some kind of urban, thing in Portland, like going into buildings at night and
doing stuff.
They're doing stuff. Yeah. Poking around.
Yeah.
And they wanted to climb Mount Hood. And so myself, and Scott Backes, Vince Anderson, Rollo Garibaldi, and Steve House went out. I think there was like 20 dudes.
Yeah.
And we broke them into groups, and over the next 3 days, we taught them kind of what we knew and this and that, and
drug them up the mountain like a Sherpa.
On day one, or the first day that we climbed, like House he was like, yeah, I climbed. And it was super bad weather. Like,
of course it was.
Fucking no visibility, total fucking whiteout, like being inside a ping pong ball, and stormy and this and that. So, and I took the group of guys with skis, and so Triple was with me, Tommy V, Jeff Swanson.
Yep.
OG
crew, yeah.
Fucking OG crew, absolutely. And so us in the ski group, we did not make it to the top that day. House, Rollo, and Scott. So I was with Vince, and those 3 guys got their guys up, and basically following House's nose is like, I climbed this with my dad when I was 14. I think I remember this place right here, like compass, and that's fucking, and Steve's nose, and that was it. And Backes had come out and totally unprepared, had basically one of those like super lightweight 3-ounce wind shells, and no goggles, nothing. It was like it could have been a bad situation. But that's when I started working with guys from your old address, and that particular trip. The next day dawned clear and whatever, and everybody who didn't make it the day before, Roland and I took him to the top, and came down, and that developed a really solid relationship with that group, and so I would say that all the way up until sort of 2011, when I don't know, most of the students of mine got killed.
They time out, or
no,
they die.
They time,
there's 2 types of timeout.
Yeah, that's true. They would, August 6th. Let's just say it's that, and so there was over a dozen students on board that bird when it went down.
That was an old squadron.
Yeah. And and that was it. The main instigators of like the years leading up to 2011. We did a lot of fucking cool trips we did 2 McKinley trips. Got guys basically from Virginia Beach to the top of McKinley and back in 11 or 12 days round trip on the
crazy.
The second one. It was fucking it was madness. But the main guys who were really pushing the climbing piece of it, Heath Robinson and Rob Reeves.
Yep.
And
I turned over the climbing department to them.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I knew them well. Yeah.
They
it's a small world for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. People probably don't realize, especially in
it's 12:45 now, or
is it
whatever, or something. I don't know.
Hold on a sec. We need to have a beer break.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize in the military world, especially at the locations that you're talking about that you specialize in working with, there's a lot of individual latitude to really, I would say, go deep, to use a term that we've been doing.
Yeah.
And you can drag other people along with you. And not everybody wants to get involved with the particular projects that you're getting involved with. So you get these little, again, a subculture of a group of individuals that's already a subculture, but then they start dragging their friends along, and you'll probably find the same names at the same trips.
Yeah.
And when those people, like I said, there's kind of 2 ways to time out, one being retired, the other one being getting killed. It's lost.
Yeah.
And the focus will go somewhere else, because the soup du jour might be driving off-road vehicles somewhere else, and people are directing their money, or the world might shift underneath the feet to bring it elsewhere. But yeah, the knowledge lost, and that crew that was lost on that helicopter, I don't know if you can't put a value to it.
No, you couldn't. I mean, just from my very limited perspective, the number of trips that we had done with those guys. I mean, and some of them I didn't get to go on.
Yep.
But the ones that were organized. I mean, I just I have this great fucking image in my head of Rat warming his feet up on Vince Anderson's belly when they got too cold on Aconcagua. I mean, so that was a trip. I think there was, and that was one of the later ones, but, Colorado and Utah a bunch of times for skiing and ice climbing stuff. A couple of trips to the top of McKinley. There was a ice climbing and skiing trip in Chile that Vince and Rollo and Bean ran, and then an Aconcagua trip, so highest mountain in the Southern Hemisphere. And I developed some really strong relationships with those guys, and a lot of that was not on sort of their drive because they were super into it. Also saw the value of it. Some of those trips were total fucking boondoggles for sure, but
maybe on the outside, but even on the boondoggle trips that I was a part of and that I went on, I mean, I went to a trip where I was lead climbing with Cosgrove and Gerberdine.
Yeah.
I'm climbing the Bastille Crap, and one of the most freaked out I've ever been is I'm leading, and I suck at everything, to include climbing, and I'm stretched out like 15 feet above my last piece of pro, wondering where I'm going to put my next one. That's really all I can think about is where I can put this.
Yeah.
And I hear a voice, and he goes, and exhales smoke at me, and taps his cigarette. He's like, hey, just put one in right here. And I look over, and Cosgrove is in tennis shoes.
Yeah.
I don't even know how he was holding on to the side of the rock. And I remember just turning back to the rock and like, I need you to leave me right now and never come back and do this again because I'm so freaked out about what you're doing. I'm about to die.
That I'm going to just jump off myself. Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, okay. And just scurried up in his tennis shoes. But we climbed for 5 days all over Boulder. And it was a total boondoggle with some lead climber stuff. But the way I looked at terrain
after that was totally
different. So there's always something, and it was amazing to me. Or, I did one climb where I got to the point, one of the guys had Gerberdine, I think, had to go above, and he basically set up a haul system because it was an overhanging section. We had to kind of like cantilever out. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, yeah, that's not really going to happen. Maybe we should switch to a top rope at this point. But I watched what he put together, like a haul system. I was like, God damn. And then I built it on a ship one time.
Like that.
Yeah.
He just knew.
And so I had the chance to see it and ask a ton of questions. And then when we would do, chem bio or nuke stuff on a ship, as a lead climber, I was responsible for the haul systems. And I remember pulling back into that Rolodex of things that I've seen. I'm like, wait a minute, anchor point, we're good. Get the thing hand carry right here. Anchor. It's like, so even though it was a boondoggle on those trips, those guys came back with a wealth of knowledge. You just may not realize how valuable it is until you have that aha moment, like, oh, okay.
But then also, I think what you said about the terrain, your relationship to broken terrain or steep terrain totally changed because you see what's possible. Because a dude wearing jeans, smoking a cigarette, and tennis shoes just scampered by, and so his obviously, I mean, Cosgrove was a total fucking stud, as is Steve.
Yep.
But once you see that, you are no longer limited by your own
I didn't
possibility.
know it was possible.
I mean, maybe it only breaks, it shatters the limitation that you have on your relationship, a little bit. And you'll never get to that point because that's, thousands and thousands of hours and that sort of thing. But just to know that it's possible. Wait, he's a human being, 2 arms, 2 legs. Okay.
And a cigarette.
Put one right here. That's fucking classic.
He literally ashed his cigarette, where he wanted me to put a cam. I'm just like, go away.
So one of the jobs that I did, I think we did this twice, maybe. So go down to Arizona and do half day in the morning. So the guys would come out and they do half day in the morning at the shooting range with Robbie.
Yep.
And I'd sit in on that with them and get and shoot government ammo and get free training because why wouldn't I? And then I'd take them out rock climbing in the afternoon. We're developing these, haul systems or whatever And one of the graduation pieces was to do a multi-pitch route, and the belay off the top of the first pitch was semi-hanging, so you're fully hanging on the anchors. You've got a little thing for your feet, but there's no place to stand. You're fully dependent, and one of the guys, and so I would have him fake lead, and then basically give him a top rope, but they would have to lead and put the gear in as if, and then we'd take the top rope away, and then they would repeat, and then get him up to that anchor, and the idea was then to bring one other person up and then to reconfigure to keep going. And we're up at this hanging belay that I'd set up, and one of the guys comes up, and he's got his hands on the anchors, like the slings that are equalizing the anchors together, and so I tell him, all right, you're safe, you're off belay, and now you can like get your reconfigure your setup so that you can bring the other guy up, and he just won't let go of the anchors. And so I'm like, dude, you might be able to do it with one hand, but I'd counsel, just lean back, hang off the anchor, use two hands to get the setup. It's going to go a lot faster. There's less chance for a mistake. He won't let go still. I'm like, dude. So I start slapping his hands. And I'm like, you're going to have to fucking let go. Look, this thing it's a 4-point, anchor.
Bomber.
It's two are equalized into one, etc. This anchor's not going anywhere. You can totally do this. And I start slapping his hands. He's like, fucking don't do that. And I was like, fucking let go. And I said, what is the fucking problem? Because I had not seen this coming. He goes, if you tell anyone this, I will fucking kill you. I'm afraid of heights. And wait, you jump out of airplanes, parachute. You fly around those little fucking helicopters, standing on the skid with, either the door openers, you're on the outside of the helicopter when there's perfectly good seats inside. It's just like, yeah, I just can't do this. I'm like, oh, fuck.
Static heights are a bitch. It's different than jumping for sure.
Okay.
Because it's abstract. When you look at the back of an airplane, you might as well look at a pastel painting.
Sure.
I guess you could see where you're going to impact, but it's really far away. First pitch up, you can see where you're going to impact. It's not that far away.
It's not far. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I've when I was part of the time that I did in France, one of the ways I earned a living was working on this action film crew, and I filmed a fair amount of base jumping, and sky surfing. So the advent of sky surfing. Laurent Bouquet, yep. Patrick de Gaillardon, Eric
Yep.
Frade, those guys. I think Frade is the only one still alive right now. But those guys, Bouquet was credited with being the first dude to do it, and to actually be able to stand up on it.
Yeah.
Guys jumped
Physically be in control of what was happening.
Exactly. And so I've been in the plane a few different times. One memorable trip, we were 10 days in Eilat, so they were jumping basically at the confluence of some borders that are somewhat contested, or maybe they have been in the past, and a lot of times jumping out of a casa, so tail drops. Yep. And watch the guys run out, and I'd have a climbing harness on and clipped to two different anchors in the plane because I'm not going anywhere near it. And Andy, I cannot fucking wrap my head around it. So here's
one for you. I don't like heights either. Okay. Static heights bug me until I'd go on like a climbing trip.
Yeah.
And get used to being around them, some more exposure, and then I'm okay.
Okay.
But like 30 feet on a roof, I'm not a fan. But standing with my toes over the edge of a 1,000-meter cliff, I'm a fan. I'm still scared of the heights, though. It just doesn't stop me.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's it. And then having the relation and being able to differentiate between 30 feet on the roof is fucking way more dangerous.
I would agree. Yes.
Than
1,000 meters.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah, because the good news when you're standing, well, generally, and guess for you when you're standing on the edge of the 1,000-meter cliff, there is a means to slow your rate of descent somewhere nearby, if not attached to you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or otherwise I would have like a 19-point anchor.
Yeah. Yes.
To ensure I'm not going anywhere. And the rope would end like 5 feet from the edge, so I'd have to be leaning over to try to see what's going.
I Yeah. And there's, for me, I mean, I started out, I had the heights problem when I started climbing.
Exposure was amazing for me. I remember my first climbing trip. It was actually with Barklow.
Okay.
Took Jason and I out to J Tree, and it was like, God, I don't know. You just, and it was the first time I'd ever set pro, and we were aid climbing. I just felt sketched out the first day. And the fourth day, you're like, okay. Like, it just was that exposure and that comfortable environment. But then I'd wait a year and go on another trip, and the first day I'm like, ugh, it's back.
Yeah. It's a perishable relationship in a way, not just a skill. But, and it's interesting to hear that. Like, I never got to the point, like I quit paragliding because shit would happen that I couldn't see. Whenever there was this skydiving thing or the base jump thing, it just, like, I've spent my entire career trying to hang on.
That's a good way to look at it.
And now I'm going to face out and fucking jump. I mean, I did get it. The elasticity of the mind to me is fucking amazing, because I suppose if I was like, Andy, I want to jump out of a plane.
Perfect. I know where to go. We're 30 minutes away.
Okay, so say that happened. Which
it just did.
It did. If that ever were to happen, there are two people that I would actually trust and ask. You are one of them.
Perfect.
And Triple's the other.
That would be a good way to go about that, because he taught me how to do tandems as it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd be in good hands.
I believe that would be the case. And then, but I could see that going from, okay, guys, don't tell anybody I'm wearing a diaper for that first jump, for sure. I could see, the acceleration of, like, if you get interested in it, then
you would go deep.
I know which things to stay away from for me.
Yeah. I know that you would, because I think in some ways you and I definitely have a similar personality trait. I have a very hard time not completely committing to something new. An example would be what I'm doing in Salt Lake. I'm here to shoot in an archery competition. I've had a bow for like a year, but I shoot every day, and I want to know how the bow works and how to make the arrows. And then I want to go on a hunting trip, but then I also want to research. It's like, I don't have two speeds, and it drives my wife absolutely batshit crazy, because she'll see a new topic show up on the desk. She's like, what's that book?
Oh no. Yeah.
Why do you have a book about wakeboarding? I'm like, it's because I'm curious. She's like, oh God.
Oh my God. There's a boat in the driveway.
It happened. Oh, I know. Well, it's funny. It happened with when you and I met in 2005. I met you at a very interesting time in my life. The trajectory on where I thought my life was going, and then the physical situation that I was in when I met you, were very different. And my career at that old address ended shortly thereafter. But I do think that having you come and teach the physical training aspect. When did you start doing those seminars, by the way? Around that time?
Fuck.
Because I know you went deep on fitness too.
Yeah. The very first military one, I don't know. As far as like the first time we were asked to do fitness,
something like you put on at the command.
Yeah, that may have been because I did do 2004. I did so I met Greg November of 2003.
Okay, and
had basically started our gym in December of that year, and I would say that it was 2004 would have been the first fitness seminar I did for the military.
Yep.
At the time, since I was working with various white side elements, I made some introductions, to, like, I carried water where, Greg couldn't.
Yep.
And
you had inroads where he did not.
Well, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that first thing there at Bragg, it was an actual CrossFit seminar. I did a 5-day seminar. I wrote, used all the curriculum from what I was doing from Relevant Fitness plus stuff that I'd learned. and then developed a test like you had to test out,
Yep.
which was not happening at seminars. I still don't think it does necessarily, but
I don't believe it does either. Written tests, but I don't think there's a practical test, at least at the first entry gate. I am a few years out of it,
yeah.
but I don't believe I know there's a written, but I don't think there's a practical.
Okay. Yeah, and so I think I had 6 guys there. I think 4 passed, and certificates were issued for basically what. And I don't remember exactly if they called the 5-day seminar a level 1 or a level 2. I mean, it covered pretty much everything there. So that would have been the first sort of very specific fitness thing would have been 2004, and so when I came back to see you guys would have been 1 year later.
Yeah, because I got hurt in 2005.
Yeah.
And found you, and then later on CrossFit and met Greg through the introduction to you to the methodology through, I'm pretty sure it was Dennis, who introduced me to you and the Sparrow. And you guys came out for that course. And I know for a fact that
is true. The Sparrow came with me.
He came, but I think back, it was we were in the small conference room. I was trying to figure out ways to rehab from getting shot.
Yeah.
Because the Navy's rehab was, here's an E-stem pad, turn it on for an hour. Like, oh, okay. I don't know anything.
How is that nerve regrowth going?
Sucks. I still can't feel my left leg from the kneecap down. And I have issues with...
Just a little drop foot thing?
I can bring my foot up, but it rotates up into the inside a little bit.
Okay.
Like my climbing days are over. I can no longer load my left foot because if there's any inclination for it to roll to the outside, once it starts, I can't stop it.
Okay.
So I can I can snowboard and I can do a lot of linear stuff, like straightforward, and I can do side to side, but I have to be cautious. There's not a lot of angular velocity where it's quick speed and then make a cut.
And make a cut kind of thing. So when you're like getting to some of these exits, you're walking on rough terrain.
Oh,
I mean,
I'm a spider monkey, goddammit.
Do you brace up that ankle to keep it from rolling, or because
I've tried to do that. I've tried everything from Ace Wrap to the hard plastic. You got it inside, outside with the Velcro.
Yeah.
I find with the inside, outside plastic sheath with the Velcro, what I get is blisters because it wears in weird places. And it still wants to start to roll. If I load it too much, it still wants to start to roll. So it still shifts my balance enough that if I was in a really, really bad spot, I might not be able to stop it.
Okay.
So, you talk about route selection. I'm looking way ahead of where I'm going.
Yeah.
And I know that, if I'm walking towards you, terrain that is sloping from my right down to my left is the most dangerous terrain for me.
Yeah.
And so I just angle a little bit differently. And I'm really slow. Getting to the exit point is actually my favorite part. That's not my favorite part because flying as a human being is pretty goddamn fun. But the walking to the exit point is like 98% of base jumping. It just doesn't show up on YouTube.
Sure.
To go back to talk with Alex, we used to do these the low Jungfrau and the high Jungfrau jump in the valley. We'd hike for 2.5 hours for 60 seconds of flight.
Yeah.
I mean, the ratio of flight, which is not even really flight, it's falling, gliding at best.
Okay. But
the ratio of that to hiking is so askew, but the hiking's really boring, which is why it doesn't make the YouTube highlight reel. Maybe a little snippet. Everybody, almost all base jumping videos, you hear the beep and it starts about 15 seconds before the exit, and then it stops when their feet hit the ground, if not when their parachute opens. The terrain and the hiking, that's where I'd say the most enriching experiences with Alex were in those times. Because we talked about life.
Yeah.
We were both out of the military trying to figure out what the hell we were going to do. We'd bounce business ideas off each other. And then we get to an exit point. I'd look up like, hey, man, you doing all right? I'm peeking out of my mind. I'm like, okay, cool, me too.
Nice.
Means we're both paying attention.
Yeah.
Don't do anything stupid, okay? And then, that's what I'll miss more than anything in that experience with him. But so I'm cautious. Long way around to say I'm very cautious. And I'll take trekking poles too. And I just really... And that, just in and of itself helps with carrying the weight. Probably 10 to 15% efficiency improvement. And you can collapse them and I put them inside of the wingsuit. So
no shit.
Oh, yeah. The backpacks we're wearing when we jump, there's no Goodwill donation box up top. So everything you hike up, you have to put inside of the suit.
Yeah.
So some people have like ski poles going down their legs.
Okay.
There's a backpack. It's called a nut sack. It's awesome. It says zip up pouch right below your nut sack. And you can put your bag in there. It's really cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I guess the question, the equivalent question when people ask climbers, how do you get the rope up there, would be to like, hey, how do you get all that shit down? You fucking fly it.
You fly it, and what's funny is you start becoming very selective as to what you will take up. I need a collapsible water bottle. I don't need this big Nalgene.
Yeah.
How did I learn that lesson? Well, I left a Nalgene for the Goodwill box that's not there, but I set fresh, delicious Swiss spring water, and I'm sure somebody has it now.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the next thing you know, you have a roll up, and then your stuff sack, the big backpack that you're carrying around, you realize I need to go as thin as humanly possible. I don't need padding on my shoulders. It's only a
Right.
couple hours. I don't need this big waistband. What I need is
Because it
something
has to collapse into.
Yes, I need a sandwich bag sized duffel bag that I
Yeah.
can put my stuff in, and then an extra T-shirt, and you're good. Or maybe a Gore-Tex jacket or something for
Right.
the elements. But reality is you're only going to be out there for a couple hours. And if you had to, you could hike down. I mean, in Switzerland, I can see the damn village
Yeah.
the entire time. I'm going to get out. I'll
So-
crawl out if I have to.
Just as kind of a joke, how big is the first aid kit?
Well, it's pretty tiny. The injuries that you're going to sustain, I mean, the reality is the injuries that you're going to sustain on the way up would probably be shortfall related,
Yeah.
a roll, sprain, or break. And the injuries on the way down are going to be fatal. So you really only need a first aid kit for the way up. And I mean, if you know anything, ability to splint and the reality is too in Switzerland, like I said, you go to Air Glacier,
Yeah.
I can call them on my phone. I have cell coverage the entire way. So the first aid kit is the size of my iPhone.
There you have it.
Stabilize, call the helicopter for the $15. It's like $10 million, or not 10 million. You know what? It might be 10 million of insurance, and they'll come and pluck you right off the cliff.
Yeah.
It's the way down that gets you, and no first aid kit puts anything back together at 120 miles an hour.
Nope.
So, yeah, it's. But again, none of that on the YouTube videos. It's to me, and I'm sure climbing has to be the same way. There's so many more rabbit holes, or there's so much more depth and breadth to what makes it all possible, as opposed to what people
Yes.
can consume and understand about what's actually happening.
And the a lot of times the good bits are when you're sitting on a ledge
Oh my God.
at night
Yeah.
without appropriate
Suffering.
insulation, just talking shit with your partner, trying to
Yeah.
which is some stuff that's tried to be recreated, and that I think K2 was the
documentary. Yes, K2. I saw it.
there was that didn't turn out that well for that many people.
Yeah.
But anyway, but those moments of sort of sitting there and talking when you've like, or being with someone who has seen your belly,
Yeah.
who has seen you scared out of your fucking
At your
mind.
rawest moment.
Yeah, and then there's no hiding, and then you get to then you're totally free to talk, and it's and those are the things. It's not I don't go out and purposely try to spend a cold, shitty night on the side of a mountain. But that can be a consequence. Actually, I think I only ever had one unplanned bivouac in the mountains the entire time. And
It seems like a really low number for how long your career was.
yeah, and the fact I just liked sleeping at home, which is also part of the, the whole speed trip was like let's get this fucking done. Because then we don't and if you're not planning to sleep, then obviously the weight that you're carrying is reduced as well. And some things you need, they have to be done. They have to be approached with a certain amount of technology, or it's going to take a certain amount of time. This route that I did with Andy Parkin eventually in Chamonix, called Beyond Good and Evil, when we succeeded, it was our fourth try. And the first attempt, I was actually up with Christophe Baudouin because Andy had drawn my eye to this fucking line of ice, splitting this fucking big rock face, and so I went up with Christophe to kind of look at it, and we climbed a couple of pitches and realized, okay, this is. I realized Christophe is not the partner for this.
He might be a little over his head.
Yeah. Or I would more responsibility would fall on me, and I considered that route to be pretty close to the edge of what I was able to do at the time. So I couldn't be looking after someone else. I need an equal or better partner for that. And then Randy and I made 2 attempts to do it in a day. And the climbing was hard enough and technical enough that we were moving slow. And the time of year when this route is going to get done, it's either autumn, late autumn, or in the springtime. It's too dry in the winter. But anyway, but they're short days when you could actually go do it. It's not the height of summer. There's no ice there in the summer. Yeah. So it's got to be cold. The days have got to be a little bit short. So we realized, okay, we can't climb this in a day. We've only managed to get 6 pitches up what we think is going to be 11 or 12 pitch route. It's 1,800 feet vertical. And so when we made the 4th attempt, we came back and just resolved, okay, we're going to spend a night. Fine. And that ended up being the key. These days, that route's routinely done in a day, and routinely the last 2 pitches, one of which is really, really fucking dangerous, don't get done. But it's also, I mean, in 2013, it would have been the 21-year anniversary of that route having its first ascent, and so a lot of shit has changed in the meantime. Not the least of which that just more collective knowledge.
Does the ice form in a similar way every year? Because I'm assuming it melts off in the summertime. Is it like you go a year, you're unsuccessful, you come back? Is it like 90% the same, or do you have to completely reassess?
You can. It will form thicker, thinner, more or less, whatever, according to environmental conditions. So you could have a year where you look on that particular route for sure. You look at it from the valley and you go, it's in, and you go up there and it's basically powder snow. It has not become ice yet. It's been too cold or whatever. So the conditions that we actually did the route in, I don't think I've ever seen any less ice on the face than when any less ice and the route got done at the same time. Because generally when Francois Damilano and Francois Marcini did the second ascent, and I can't remember if it was 2 years later or 3 or whatever. But the ice conditions they had, I mean, we're talking about let's say in a vertical corner of sort of a 90-degree corner where the door is over there.
Yep.
And you can imagine a runnel of ice that's no wider than a foot wide in that corner.
Oh, wow.
And some of that coming away because it's not well supported and that sort of thing to, flash forward to second ascent and the conditions people are looking for, that is a 6-foot wide curtain of ice. So Montreal.
Indeed. Montreal, destroyed myself for like 5 days. And then we kind of detached a little bit. I went one route. You continued down the route that you were on, founded Jim Jones, best gym name ever. And, I mean, you were, again, deep, to use the same word we've been using over and over again, deep into that. And, again, this is where I kind of started watching from afar. So when did the bike come into that? Because then I remember you going through this phase of just cranking out the miles on the bike.
So I fell in a rock gym in 1993 and fucked up my left shoulder and had held it together for 13 years on, rehab and strengthening basically and gritting my teeth. And so in October 2006, I was on a job in the Tetons. Some characters you will know.
Yep. The Motley Crew.
The Motley Crew. Let's see. I mean, I could go through the guys. I remember that trip the most is because Bean Bowers was with us on that trip. Who he is no longer with us. Mark Carter was with us also, who is no longer around. And those are 2 guys that, on that particular trip. But anyway, I basically ruptured my biceps tendon, and the biceps tendon was the only thing really holding my shoulder together, it turned out. So rupture the top down, all pain immediately went away, but my shoulder got super unstable. I came back down here to Salt Lake, had to visit with the doctor and full shoulder reconstruction. And so I had 6 weeks of basically hugging a pillow during rehab. And I was like, well, I need to stay fit. I need something. So I set up a bike that I had on a fucking turbo trainer in the garage and started.
Got tired of the scenery?
Got tired of, yeah, exactly. Definitely got tired of that scenery. And then realized like, oh, wait, this is actually a thing. Guys ride through the winter in Utah in their garages, and oftentimes they watch old like bike racing DVDs or whatever. And so I got like a DVD of like the 2004 or something, 2002, I don't know, there was some tour. And
Tour to something?
Tour to something, yeah.
You ordered a spandex suit right after that, didn't you?
I was already wearing one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Oh yeah. It's you know, it's part of going deep into the culture.
You have to, full immersion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, so it developed out of that. And then in February 2007, like I'd spent all fucking winter pedaling my, you know, to nowhere. And so in February of 2007, so whatever, I'd been like totally rehabbed and it was clear to go ride outside and do some other shit. But I went to the orthopedic specialty hospital here where Max Testa was, he'd started a sports medicine kind of clinic there. And I decided, well, fuck, I want to go get some kind of like, you know, because I had already been down the science route of doing sort of lactate and VO2 max testing and that kind of thing. I decided, well, I want to go see if I can do, you know, see if it's any different on the bike than, you know, has been for, you know, hiking uphill or whatever. And so I go in and we do the little test, and turns out, you know, Max lived in Courmayeur for a while, which is just across the Mont Blanc Massif from Chamonix, because his dad taught at the Alpine military school there, and this and that. So we like connected on a nice level. I gave him an Italian version of Kiss or Kill to read, and the test results came back, and he said, you know, you could, if you paid attention, you could actually do okay.
It's almost like you have this base of endurance.
It's amazing. Yeah, or something. Yeah. And so 2007 was my first season bike racing, and I raced consistently through 2010. Did a few races in 2011 once, but as soon as I went deep into the movie jobs,
I was going to say, concurrently while you were doing this, you were also, I would say, behind the scenes, working with the actors that, you know, are on the posters. That selling the movies
came a little bit later. So after 300, which was a transformative experience by all accounts. I mean, on all levels. But I didn't like the vibe around the business itself. And so after that was done, I told Zach, look, this was great. Thank you for the opportunity, but I can't do this again. Because I've seen some people behave really badly and be rewarded for it. And that's fucked in my world. So
it's an interesting ecosystem. I've only been peripheral to it, but I've seen exactly the same thing. It's, I mean, 99.9% blue collar. People working their asses off.
Yep.
And 0.01% the star.
Yeah.
And the behavior acceptance between those two groups is very bizarre.
It's. I mean, if you're putting asses in seats, then you know you have a certain amount of latitude, and as we have seen, and then there's some weird expectations that develop with that about what you're, you know, how you're entitled to behave because no one has ever said no, and so I told Zach, look, I can't do it, and that's how Logan and Dave worked with him on the next two movies, which were Watchmen and Sucker Punch.
Yep.
So I was away from, so when I was at that point, you know, sort of 2006, 2007, I was really just, you know, in the gym in Salt Lake, starting to teach our first public seminars, and then still doing a lot of military work, and so the clothing system thing was done. We made this educational DVD that everybody who got a system got the DVD about how to wear it, and you know what combinations to use in what situations. It was quite comprehensive, and I think the iMac thing was getting developed at that time, and then also parallel to that, we were doing an R&D project for PJs to basically miniaturize a bunch of climbing equipment.
Yep.
So that for a confined space rescue, or raising or lowering a patient in this sort of steep terrain, kind of stuff. And that was another thing. That system needed a lot of education. And actually, Josh, who from Iron Mountain, who you met here, he said, "Oh yeah, I got introduced to that system." He goes, "But nobody taught us how to use it." So we were all really kind of afraid of it.
The classic military tale.
Yeah,
This thing's awesome. Does anybody in here know how to use this?
exactly.
To include with weapon systems sometimes.
I don't doubt it. I mean, and yeah, and it was that was like, okay, you want to cut the weight in half, you want to reduce the size by this much, you want to, all of these things. I'm just like, it all comes at a cost. There's a reason the tires are on the Formula One car for a very limited amount of time. And with this system, if I was the rope. I mean, it was all based around a 6.4 mil rope. That here's the deal: you need to, if this gets pulled out of the packaging and used, it gets thrown away.
Yeah, one-time use.
Yeah, that's it, because you can't inspect it. You don't know what's happened to it. You can spill whatever solvent on it you want. It's probably going to be inert to it probably won't respond to that. But some other stuff, yeah, there's going to be. Anyway, I didn't go back to the movie business till 2011, when Zach, he's masterful. He said he had a job that he didn't trust anyone else to do.
It's an interesting term to describe Zach. I don't know him that well. I've only been around him a few times, but I generally appreciate his personality for sure.
Yeah, he'll be sitting in that seat soon.
Excellent.
Actually, we have a discussion scheduled about his next project.
Awesome.
And, it'll be. But he's kind of tricked me. He knew exactly what to say because he'd called Lisa first, and he's like, I know if I call Mark, he's going to say no. And
he's playing chess.
Oh fuck yeah! I was so far down the road.
He's gathering intel on the side.
Yep. and the way that he pitched it, after Lisa's counseling, he's just like, I don't trust anyone else to do this. In fact, it's so hard, I don't think anybody else can do it. I'm like,
maybe even you.
Excuse me? Say that again? You doubt my ability?
Well played.
No, I don't. I just don't. And within 2 days, I was out in LA for a meeting. And
well played by Zach.
Oh, fuck yeah. 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 And for a variety of reasons, that was the Man of Steel job. For a variety of reasons, that was an incredible experience because it was, unfortunately, 11 months essentially away from home, and then done with that job and basically home for 3 weeks and then gone again. And then, I mean, it's a lifestyle that comes with consequences, and those are pretty obvious to me now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the bike thing started in 2007. I raced okay that year. But really 2009, 2010. 2010 was the sort of the breakthrough year where, I actually finally won a race, which it turns out it's not easy to do. And then, and one of the big ones was like in Tour of Park City, which that version of it was 150 miles and 7,000 or 8,000 feet of climbing or whatever. Basically a little over 6 hours for me, where, we shattered the 85 miles in, 6 of us, just dropped everybody, that field of 80 or something starting in our masters category, and shattered the field there, stayed, together as 6 over the top of Bald Mountain Pass. So you go over a pass that's over 10,000 feet on that race. So we dropped Sean by accident there, and then Dwayne down. So we went into the finish 4 up, and I ran. I was second by half a wheel, and I think that it'd be cool to win, but still that's probably like one of the best races that I've done. And then 2011, because I raced a little bit in Illinois. Because ACA Nationals were.
And that's where you were for the movie stuff, right?
Yeah, so the movie stuff happens at different locations. Some of them nice, some of them less nice. So Man of Steel, I was in Pasadena for about 2.5 months, and did a fuck ton of riding.
Yeah, there's some great spots out there.
Jesus, so good. And then we moved from there to, I think we were probably 3 months, June, July, August, 3.5 months or so just outside of Chicago. Pan Flat. I mean,
Yeah.
when Michael and I did one ride there, it was like 102 miles and just over 1,000 feet of climbing, which I can get.
It's almost
in
like being back in your garage.
Yes. Well, the difference is like it's cornfields on one side, soybeans on the other,
And then they flip flop.
and then they flip flop. Yeah.
So when you're out there,
Yeah.
are you just tasked with keeping Henry on track, or are you basically turning him and crafting him into what they want him to look like on the screen?
Yes. I mean, it's like, so he came to that movie fresh off of Immortal. Well, no, he did Immortals where he got down, he's whatever, 6 feet, 6'1" or something. He got down to 170 for Immortals. So he was super
Wow.
fucking lean, like not
Yeah.
eating and just doing a ton of fucking like Tabata style body weight stuff. And then he did a movie right after that called Cold Light of Day where he wasn't supposed to be lean. So he went on the beer and pizza diet. And so when I got to, he had never like thought too much about, like the physical activity thing wasn't, that had to be taught, like the continuous thing and the paying attention. So I told Zach, I said, how long's the shoot? And the shoot is 6 months, basically 122 days, I think, for that one. And he has to, be held in whatever condition he gets in on August 1st, so the first day of shooting, he's got to be in,
Yeah. It's got to look the same
He's
throughout
got-
the movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I said, okay, if the condition needs to be that stable, then I need to have, a lot of time in advance. So basically, I was with him, 4 months. Michael was with me on that also because we essentially had 4 people on that job to train. So go from 300 where we had like 35 guys
Yep.
to this one where we had three males and 1 female. Yeah, I mean, it was basically an exercise in bodybuilding, essentially, because, every superhero, worth his salt has
Better have some traps.
better, yeah, but not too big. But it's broad shoulders, narrow waist seem to be the thing. Like, and if
Yeah.
your shoulders had, you got to have a neck. There's an aesthetic there, especially for the female. So because the long slender neck, it's a natural eye catching sort of whatever. Anyway, so by the end of that, Henry had been with us for 11 months.
You think you'll continue to do that, or have you had enough of the?
Oh, I'm done. Yeah. Much the same way that I stopped climbing. After Justice League was done, I spent a couple of months in Australia with Jason on the Aquaman movie, but realized like
There's a cost to it.
there's a cost to it, and I'm not like I've hit the high point already. Like as far as what I'm going to like, because for me, I mean, I didn't really talk about those jobs as much as people who've done less spray more, I guess.
I would say unless people actively researched it, it would be hard. It wouldn't be hard, but they would have to research to find your name associated with it, as compared to the opposite, like you described, of maybe a peripheral involvement, allowing people to think that they had a deeper involvement.
Yeah.
You were quiet about it, for sure.
Yeah, because I don't think it's because A, it's it's somebody else's privacy, but B, it's like, well, it's just what we do, and I don't care who the person is, and you might like hold them up because they're going to be on the screen, and you're going to da da da. They're still superheroes, It's still sort of make believe. Although we do bring a very serious notion of reality into those jobs, and that's a lot of why we have been quite successful with it, is because of the standards that we set and then impose, and then it's 24/7 essentially. So it's building up the physical body. It's changing them psychologically. It's being in their face. I mean, when I trained Gal for her original appearance as Wonder Woman, which was in the Batman vs Superman movie, I was, let's see, I lived for 3.5 months across the street from her home in Tel Aviv.
Really?
Yeah. Part of the reason for that is because her husband owned that little boutique hotel, 10-room hotel at the time, so it was very convenient.
That helps. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was meant to go for 2 weeks, and then the movie got pushed by 3 months, and so I ended up being there for 3.5 months, and
Wow.
and so there was there's no getting away, and we meet and walk to the car and go to the gym in the mornings, and sometimes we'd train again in the afternoons, and sometimes it would involve eating, and together. I mean, it's a very unusual relationship to develop with someone.
It's an intimate relationship. I mean, I owned a gym for a couple of years, and yeah, if you really want,
that's right.
I did. I'm a jack of all trades,
Yeah,
and an absolute master of none.
Yeah.
But it's an intimate relationship to get involved, especially if they want to. I mean, there's the window shopping version, like, yeah, I'll pay you X amount of dollars per hour, and this is the result that I'm looking for. That's the lowest level of entry, and that there's no intimacy really. That's transactional.
Yes.
But yeah, people who really like, hey, I need to tell you about how I got to this point in my life, and this is what I'm looking at doing, and I need it to be deeper. There's a level of intimacy there that goes beyond your normal interaction for sure.
Yeah, and to the point where some of the relationships definitely have an expiration date.
Yep.
Because no one really wants to be pushed that hard all the time. And if there's an option, for the actual Wonder Woman movie, I did not train Gal.
Yep.
And I mean, I started with her for a couple months. She was on another job in Atlanta, and it was really hard to work around that. But she needed someone with who didn't have history, and someone who was willing to be a little bit more flexible than I was in terms of how much time and attention that I could give or whatever. But I had, a bunch of other Amazons.
Yeah.
I mean, on that job, and there were, I had Danny Houston was the one male that I trained on that job. He was, in London for like 3 weeks. For a couple times a week we train him, but the rest of it, 30 plus women, and I consider that probably, that and one client on Justice League, like that. Okay, I if I never do one of these jobs ever again, these high points, that I've learned, and I joke about it, but it really is, it's not exercise physiology, it's exercise psychology. Because if I can manipulate, cajole, coach, teach, whatever, someone behavior and attitude, then the physical shit's super easy.
I used to describe personal training as 80% therapist, 20% trainer.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my own motivations, as do you, and the really effective trainers can navigate through your bullshit and figure out where the actual drive and end state is. Because I also found it was different than when people would express. They say they want this, and then like a month down the road, you're like, I think you might have misplaced energy.
Yes.
And directed somewhere else. It was challenging. I enjoyed it, but I'd never do it again either. I mean, I have a hard enough time motivating myself. I don't have the emotional or mental horsepower to put it in to train other people again.
And it can be, quite a costly relationship in a way and not in a negative sense. It costs something. It's energy out, it's thought, it's a lot of things that.
Yep.
And so, and for me, the epiphany was, I was in Australia at one point, and actually Selena was able to come with me for my second visit down there. And I just thought, I'm only here for the paycheck. And that's not a good enough reason for me to keep doing this. Even if, she can be with me all the time. Part of it, the reason to stop was I did Wonder Woman and Justice League back to back. And so I was in London for 14 months, and Selena was here with her medical practice, and we'd see each other once a month, basically. I'd either, she'd come.
It's not easy, yeah.
And I decided that, okay, she is too important. Like, I'd rather give up this income and whatever, kudos or, bullshit social status apparently is supposed to come with it, in order to be around her and, in her life and vice versa. So, yeah, multiple reasons that I decided not to do it. And it actually coincided nicely with Zach's, departure from the whole superhero universe, and he's actually he's working on what's going to be the fucking magnum opus, and
Oh boy.
and we'll and like it's more serious work in a way. I mean, not that he didn't take that seriously, but still in the end it's comic book characters, and so you have a lot more latitude.
Well, you can bend
all
and
around.
distort reality. You can create your own reality. Truly, if they got capes on, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So you can suspend all that.
The Spartans wore capes, man.
Are we sure they did?
We are not sure. I just
I
saw
know
the
they
movie.
had
I don't
shields
know.
and swords.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about that movie? Seeing those capes too in real life, they color corrected them later.
Yeah.
They were nowhere near that red in real life. Shh. That's all right. Nobody's going to see the behind the scenes.
Welcome to the real movie world. Because
So I got one more for you.
Oh boy.
Because I mean, we're coming up on 3 hours. This has actually been awesome.
So, and this is the first of.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
for sure.
Fuck.
So and I ask this question because I'm struggling with this one too, I think a little bit. Out of all the stuff that you've done, you started off, say, as an alpinist and then an author and then into the business world and then a gym owner, a trainer. I know you guys are working on a bunch of stuff now, a podcaster now. How do you describe yourself? And another way to ask it would be, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, Mark, what do you do for a living? Like, I'm struggling with that one because I have gone down some ridiculous tangents as well, too. And I think I struggle with it because I have no idea where I'm going. So I really don't have an idea how to describe what I do or what I've done. But you've done exponentially more than me, so I'm curious because what I'm looking for is a good answer that I could steal.
Okay. I give you the answer that you can't steal. I mean, you can, but it might not work.
I'll borrow it.
But well, whatever. I mean, I just don't think it's a useful answer. For me, in a way, that's why I said you can't steal it, because you'll just be like, oh, that's bullshit. But, a searcher.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it is, because I don't honestly the sort of means that are in front of me that I've found that I've used as vehicles to learn not only about myself but stuff the world around. I don't want to yes I'm no longer a climber. I'm of it. I came from there. It's who made me, who shaped, the climbing shaped and the lessons of the mountains and not the serious nature of it in a sense, shaped my ideas about a lot of things. So I'm of it, but I don't practice that anymore. And so I can't say that. And I could say I'm a writer, but then that the problem with that is then people are like, what do you write? I'm like, oh,
you're still writing though.
I mean, I'm still,
yeah.
I mean, but it's not a thing. If somebody said, "Hey, what's up with this whole nonprofit business? What are you doing?" You're like, "Oh, you got this zine that you make, and you're doing this podcast, and now, hopefully, within the next, in 2 months, we'll publish. There'll be a book out, and so I joke and I say, I think we started a publishing company, but I don't really want it to be that. I want it to, necessarily. It's just that it can't help but be that. Like, I can't stop any of this right now. It has momentum. So I can't, I don't want to be, I'm a publisher, I'm a podcaster, I'm a this, I'm a that. Because the pigeonhole thing never worked that well, except when I was climbing and only climbing.
Yeah.
So I don't. I just.
Do you think the searching will ever end for you?
Oh no.
I don't think it will for me either. I think that might be the best term. I would say wanderer, but it's more. It's more that implies implies a sense of bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
Whereas I like to think I can see the walls and try to avoid them most times.
Try and avoid hitting. Yeah.
Even though I've had contact once or twice. But yeah, I like searcher. I struggle with that one. My least favorite question is when people say, "Hey, what do you do for a living?"
Yeah, and so
like, I don't. You know,
you're self-employed. I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's the Twitter answer for an elevator. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what and I'll take the opportunity in the future to turn this back around on you, so we don't have to hit that rabbit hole right now.
I was just curious if you had. I mean, because I'm sure you've just done so many things, and you've done it at a level in each of those things that I think is atypical for a lot of people.
There's a lot I could have and should have done better, but I guess thank you. I don't know how to respond to that, but searcher, or seek, whatever. Yeah, wanderer, that just got fucking.
It implies no compass.
Gandalf all over it or whatever, but with the staff with no magic.
If you keep your hair going though.
Oh,
I mean, I can Photoshop a little bit here.
Yeah, so it all. Yeah, I'm going to bring back the mullet.
Okay,
it's been said a few times. Just because, it goes with pit viper sunglasses, and I guess I did read recently about a mullet festival, which could only happen in Australia, but does. It's an annual thing.
I like it.
And there's some proud. Anyway, it's kind of a joke. I just stopped cutting it at one point, and then I was like, huh. Well, I still have it, so the opportunity, starts falling out. That'll.
Yeah, you still got
take it. You
still got time.
Yeah, let me turn one around just for a second. We talked a little bit about. Obviously, we've been, in both your career, first and second, let's say.
Yeah.
And mine, we've been, around some risk, which I believe is essential, whether it's social or physical or whatever, but, in terms of keeping us sharp, making us pay attention and be present. Obviously, that comes with, knowing people, being around people who don't come back. And then, we touched on it briefly of like, how do you go on after that?
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing to explore. I try not to, at a certain point in life, I dwelled on it more. I try not to now. There was in my old multimedia presentations, I would always ended, there's a passage, basically, celebrating people who aren't around, and it always finished with a list, and I stopped giving those shows, and I stopped with my list 1999 when Alex Lowe got killed, because he was number 40 on my list of dead friends and climbing partners. And if I just stay with climbing in that family or tribe, if you will, it's probably, because it's 99, it's, we're closer to 60 than to 50. And then add military students, many of whom were climbing partners, many of whom, did some pretty cool stuff with. It's a lot of people who aren't here anymore. And sometimes, I dwell on that just because of, and it's always because my life is less rich. It's always because of, I did done a couple of fundraising things, and one of them was a thing for the Brian Bills family had put together, which is Little Warriors, which is a organization that takes kids from the command whose dads aren't around now to take them out fishing, to take them out into the mountains and hiking and climbing and stuff like that. And that to me is like the part of the biggest tragedy is like, my dad left when I was 10, but I got fucking lucky because there was the phone. And even if he's, and so when those guys get, die, the follow on is a lot different than if I had splatted, when I was in my early 20s as a climber. Because that's just it's a cleanup problem. It's not, there's no ties. There's this, a few people are going to be hurt, but he hadn't really been around long enough to have a positive effect or whatever, meaningful effect on people. And and being around that a lot, of in parts of, you know, my life where I'd manage relationships. And there's actually a chapter in Kiss or Kill about a relationship I had with Fred V. Mall, who for the first 2 years, you know, I was cordial with him. He's a cool kid, but I knew he's gonna get it.
Yeah.
You know, he was gonna get chopped. And so it would be just, if he was an acquaintance, it'd be easier.
Hurts less.
It hurts
Yep.
less. Yeah. It's just, is it, you know, it was a kid who was moving too fast, you know, or whatever. And something happened that, we ran into each other somewhere and ended up, spending the last 3 weeks before he got killed, going climbing, hanging out. He got along with my girlfriend at the time, you know, really well. Was an amazing 3 weeks. That when he got killed made me realize it could have been 2 years and 3 weeks.
Yep.
That I had that relationship with him. It didn't hurt any, you know, if it would have maybe hurt more after 2 years and 3 weeks than it did after like 3 solid, you know, weeks together. But it was that was the thing that really made me realize, like, well, fuck it, it's just feeling, right? And I'm okay. Good feeling, bad feeling. I want that. I want that emotional experience. I don't necessarily want it to be from that source.
Yeah.
But I recognize that, look, I'm protecting myself from potential sensation because that sensation might, you know, be negative or whatever. And I started living a bit more fully at that point, rather than like segregating people out just because they, you know, I figured they're not going to be around for that long. Well, none of us are going to be around for that long. Some of us, you know, maybe too long, who knows? But with that idea of like, how do you go on? These days, it's just, it's so much a piece of life and a piece of my life that it seems pretty normal.
You're talking about death?
Yes.
Yeah.
And normal to have it happen. I mean, if we talk about Alex,
Yep.
you know, my exposure to him was, you know, Yosemite trip, pretty much. But when I read that, I'm no longer surprised.
Yeah.
You know, in a way, like it's such a part now that, I mean, I don't want to be callous about it, because that's also a form of sort of avoiding feeling. And I mean, it's self-protection, and there are certain things that, it's how to, you know, behave in the aftermath, or how do you continue? How do you go back to the thing? It's by way, it's by way of honoring that person, the relationship, the experiences that I had together. That, like, you don't get to change who you are because of what happened to someone else, and that it could happen to, you know, you or to someone even closer or whatever. But it's like, okay, I need to continue in style, if you will, because the way that I conduct myself is what brought me into a relationship with that person in the first place.
Yeah.
So I don't get to change that. And nor can I force stuff. It's like I try to, you know, I have silly calendar reminders sometimes in my phone about, oh, yeah, it's August 6th again, or it's Memorial Day, or it's, you know, yeah, oh, it's December again. Fuck, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't. I think I'm less morbid about it now, partially because of the sadly persistent exposure.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that, for sure. I mean, I think the community that you come from, you're going to expose to it far more likely and frequently than people driving down the street.
Yeah, but I think base culture is not dissimilar, And there's definitely some crossover. There's a girl who is a really good climber, that Steph Davis, who,
Yep.
now she's jumping and flying pretty much every day.
Yep.
And still going climbing.
Dean,
And
she was married to Dean, and
Yeah.
obviously that was in Yosemite. With I think the guy's name was Graham was with him, I believe.
I believe that's the name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
for that, that's like one of those things where I know exactly where I was sitting in a fucking Whole Foods parking lot in Atlanta when that message came through on the phone. It's like, okay, that's a bit too immediate. That was it's not been 24 fucking hours yet.
That was the situation I had with Alex.
Yeah.
Largely, I was out in the middle of nowhere camping with my family with no cell coverage, and we started our drive back into town. And as soon as we hit cell coverage, my phone just blew up.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the names of the people who were texting me, and before I read any of the texts, I was able to piece together what had happened, because I went through the Rolodex like you were talking about, like, okay, who's jumping right now, who's overseas, and the only person that we knew on all of those texts.
Oh, that everybody who had texted you.
Correct.
The
And a lot of them were
Nexus
just, hey,
point.
give me a call, because they wanted to talk face to face, and then one of them just was, hey, did you hear about Alex? And it's like, fuck, I did now.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And it was on my sister's birthday, so it's a day I'll never forget for sure. And, I don't know if I'm at that phase where I'm less morbid about it. I think often about the guys on extortion from the perspective of, if you and I had not met and I had not left that command, there's a good likelihood I would have been on that helicopter.
Yeah.
And I understand the wake that was left behind, like you're talking about the families, and I'll catch myself, not often, but occasionally, overlaying that to my own family. When I'll just, in a random moment, I'm sitting there like, what would be different? What would their life be different? What would my kids remember about me? What would they not remember? What massive fuck-ups that I had as a father would ruin them for the rest of their life that I didn't have the chance to course correct. And it's tough. And then with Alex, like we were talking about, I'm probably in the most unsafe position I am right now to jump, which is why my jumping stuff is it's shelved, specifically base jumping, because my initial feeling that I feel like I'm dealing with is anger. But what I think it really is fear, because I've shared so much of those experiences, and we were there at that time period when, people were going in, and it's just funny, again, to go back to the razor blade, we're sitting on it, bleeding, talking ourselves into how other people are bleeding more and how we're going to be okay.
And isn't that a beautiful sunset?
Fuck. Yeah.
All joking aside. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also, so I would venture to say it's also hard when, people are, okay, if it's something that's beyond your control, okay, fine. Like extortion, for example. Okay.
Yeah.
That's just,
that is actual math catching up
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah. And then, but okay, let's say within the little subculture, let's say base subculture or climbing subculture, where like, okay, I know these guys and some of them are, on the periphery, and that'll never happen to me because this.
Yep.
We touched on that. When they're that close, when they're up here, when they're but for the grace of God, go I think it's much harder.
Yeah.
Because, and maybe that thing is, fear in a sense of like, it fucking could have been me.
I think that's what I struggle with the most, is the realization that I'm struggling with, have I been talking myself into something blindly as opposed to looking at it? Have I been looking at what I choose to do with my eyes closed?
Yeah.
Essentially. And painting a picture, even though my eyes are closed, and telling my brain, this is what I see, this is what I'm capable of. Or do I need to open my fucking eyes and take another look at this? I may well hang it up. I don't know which direction it's going to go, but I know if I go right now, if I were to go base jumping, I think I'd be fine skydiving, but if I go base jumping, I'll be making decisions in a compromised state.
Yeah.
And I'll want to go harder because I am pissed, I wish he was alive so I could kick his ass.
Yep.
It's like,
yeah.
And that anger would, like, what? God damn it, I'm going to fly this line faster and lower and hard. And it's like, that's wrong. It's incorrect. And all I really have been able to work through so far is that I know I'm in that spot, so the stuff stays locked away. That's as far as I've gotten with it.
There was a point I remember, and it's come up several times. Peers of mine who, they go up, to solo something to sort out some emotional shit, and you get like highly focused or whatever. There's been some cool shit done in the mountains fueled by that anger or that angst or that breakup or whatever.
Yep.
Stuff. The difference, the reason that we can't quite meet on the thing is the speed with which stuff happens in your world versus my old world, if you will, of climbing. Once shit starts going bad in the mountains, it can escalate really quickly.
Yep.
Like it can sort of just, as soon as there's a bit of momentum, but oftentimes it takes a really long time to get to that point.
Yeah.
Like if it's happening super, you might just be, I was just walking along and a rock fell and fucking, killed me.
That's pretty quick.
That's pretty quick. But if it's a sequence of decisions that put you in a place that you can't get back from kind of situation, or the storm that you thought you could sit out, but actually got worse and worse and worse to the point where you can't go up or down and you just, we got to try.
Yeah.
Because we're now out of food. One of the big routes in Pakistan that we tried to do, we got caught from a storm 1,200 feet below the summit, and we had run out of food that day, essentially. And we had, enough fuel to make water, but we got to try to get down. And for me, the easy point on that was like one of the guys was Ward was altitude sick, and had been for a little bit. And it's like, well, if the gods need a human sacrifice, I know who it's going to be.
That's so dark.
But it was my way of rationalizing behavior that we were going to undertake anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just like, it won't happen to me because it's going to be him because he's the, or whatever. That's whether that's true or not or whatever. And then some, all four of us came back from that, but some really, really crazy shit happened. But that the anger is, I won't go away for a little bit.
Yep.
But I commend you for, recognize the condition that you're in emotionally and just saying, look, I don't need, whatever it is that I would go jump off is going to still be jumpable.
It's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Which is the same thing in the mountains. Like, okay, the mountain's going to be there. Just, if it's not good now, and then I can always come back. And if I don't come, what's the risk of not coming? What if I don't come back to this mountain?
Yeah.
And I don't get to climb this mountain. Oh, poor you. It's like, is my life going to be any fucking different if I go and jump this same exit yet again,
or if I never jump again,
or if I,
really that's what I'm talking to myself. Like, what's more valuable, that risk or being here for my kids for decades? It's a tough.
That's an easy answer.
It is an easy answer. Internally, tougher than just saying that. Like, there's a pull and push, and it's just so, it's so fresh. I've had kids for as long as I've been jumping. But again, was I on the razor blade bleeding more than I thought? I got to figure that out first. And the first step for me is to get the fuck off the razor blade.
Yeah.
So that's where I am.
Fucking hell, man.
Yeah. Round one.
Yeah. I think that seems like a semi-logical point to exit on.
I'm glad we linked up.
Yeah, me too.
Honored that you popping the cherry.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm going to be everywhere.
Yeah, you will be.
No, I don't. I just want to have good conversations.
Yeah.
And, to go on,
it's easy to get deluded.
Yep. And it's easy to, I think when we were talking about the scheduling part, to sort of, succumb to that pressure oh, I need to record something. I mean, so I'm
Yeah.
going to record because it happened in here the other day. We were just like, we got to sit down and record. And then in the end, I'm just like, you guys, that was fucking bullshit. I'm not even going to. And then, but everybody sees it differently and recognizes their participation differently and hears something that the other person might. And so Michael and Ross went through and they're like, there's really good lessons. And remember we were talking about this. I'm like, yeah, it's true. Shit.
Yeah.
But there was a dick joke right before that, or whatever. And,
Sometimes there's dick jokes.
yeah, yeah, fucking hell. Well, I'm glad A, to link up,
Hell yeah.
B, that you're around, C, that you got the fuck out of Southern California.
Oh God. Should have done it a decade ago. I'm a slow learner, apparently.
Okay.
Hell
All right.
yeah, it's been good. Until next time, my friend.
Thank you.
Until next time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you as always. I would not want to do this podcast as much as I do and look forward to it as much as I do if it wasn't from the feedback that I receive from those of you out there who are listening to this. And I have the ability to look at the back end numbers, and they're slowly growing, which is awesome. It's cool to feel like you still have the ability to make a difference. And occasionally I'll get some emails from people who say that the podcast or the topics discussed or the people that I was discussing things with have done exactly that. They've had an impact on their life, and that in and of itself is enough to want to keep going. So thank you to everybody who is listening. Thank you to everybody who has written review.